Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dreamland Encounters. Here on this channel, I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. The drive through southern Illinois was quiet, just as you'd expect on Route 14. Empty cornfields stretched out on both sides, with the occasional silo or weathered barn breaking up the landscape. It was early September, and that magical time of evening when the sky still glowed but the ground had fallen into shadow. I was heading home after visiting my aunt, hoping to make it back before midnight. My windows were cracked open, letting in the warm evening air and the first sounds of crickets chirping in the roadside ditches. The music played softly in the background. Around 7:30, something caught my eye. Off to the left, maybe half a mile into a field, I spotted some strange lights. At first, I thought they might be from farm equipment. Those big harvesters have lights everywhere, but these were different. They weren't moving, and they were unusually high up. 5 or 6 pale yellow-white lights hung in a shallow arc, just hovering completely still. These weren't like typical vehicle lights. No blinking, no sound, and spread out in a way that didn't make sense for a single machine. I slowed down, trying to get a better view, but the high corn and hedges blocked my line of sight. I considered pulling over, but there was no real shoulder, just some gravel and drainage areas. Then, as I rounded a slight bend, the trees completely obscured the field. When I emerged on the other side just seconds later, the lights had vanished. Something about the whole thing felt odd. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see them reappear. At one point, I thought I glimpsed something faint far behind me, but it might have just been a reflection. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a drone display or something similar. But the more I thought about it, the less explainable it seemed. That unexplained moment stuck with me for the rest of the drive. About 2 hours later, I stopped at a small gas station near Yucca. I'd been needing a bathroom break for miles and figured I'd grab a drink while I was there. It was one of those older, worn-looking stations that dot rural highways. Just a small gas station with a dingy shop lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. 2 pumps out front and nobody around when I pulled in, except for a black SUV parked off to the side, engine off, windows sealed tight. The vehicle looked newer, out of sync with the rundown surroundings. I went inside, used the restroom, grabbed a water and a quick snack. Back outside, the SUV remained unmoved. I didn't pay it much mind until I was in my car, engine running, window cracked to let in some air. Then he appeared, completely silent. Materializing from the darkness, he leaned in and rested his hand on my window frame. The sudden presence jolted me. Dressed impeccably, a tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, dark tie, and sunglasses, despite the night's blackness. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no smile, just blank neutrality. You didn't see anything unusual on Route 14, right? The words were soft yet precise, almost mechanical. His gaze seemed to pass through me rather than look at me directly. I hesitated, then replied no. He didn't move immediately, hands still on the car, studying me. A single nod followed, then he released the window and walked back toward the SUV. But he didn't get in. Instead, he stood beside the driver's side door, facing away. I pulled out faster than normal, nerves jangling. Something felt deeply wrong, though nothing specific had happened. About a mile down the road, I checked my rearview mirror. The SUV was there, 2 car lengths behind, a shadowy shape without headlights. For 15 miles, it matched my every move. Lane changes, speed adjustments. It mirrored everything perfectly. Not aggressive, but constant, unnerving. On a hunch, I turned onto a smaller county road winding through farmland. The SUV followed. Another random turn onto a narrow gravel lane. No streetlights, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles. Open dark fields stretched in all directions. I glanced back. I killed my lights and pulled over, engine still running, and waited. Nothing. The SUV was gone. I sat there for maybe 3 minutes, listening. No other cars came. Only the sound of insects rustling in the corn stalks broke the silence. When I drove home, the SUV never reappeared. But the next morning changed everything. Strange marks covered my car's driver's side window. Fingerprints smudged the glass where someone had leaned in. Higher up on the window frame, it looked like someone had gripped the top. A thin, straight mark ran from the roof's edge down to the door handle. Not a scratch, but an oily, iridescent residue that sank into the paint. I tried wiping it off, No luck. The car wash later that day couldn't remove the streak. The SUV vanished from my life, but the mystery lingered. A few nights later, a black sedan appeared across the street from my house. No occupants, no lights. It wasn't a neighbor's car. 5 minutes later, it disappeared. Could be nothing. But I've started avoiding Route 14. Not because of the lights, because of the question. The way he asked it, like he already knew the answer. We were behind Tyler's house, where the cornfield meets the thinning woods, late October in Iowa, around 9:45 at night. Warm, with enough leaves to create a jet. The rustling. Grain dryers hummed in the distance. That persistent farm smell of burnt chaff and fertilizer hung in the air. 4 of us were there. Me, Tyler, Jordan, and Miles. No drinking. Just hanging out before Halloween weekend, walking paths we'd carved years ago. Tyler wanted drone footage for a horror short, using a cheap camera to capture the nighttime field. About 100 yards in, we saw the first light, a dim flashlight-like glow in the sky. Miles spotted it first. It blinked twice, paused, then blinked again. Not a plane, no sound, it didn't move like a drone. Instead, it hung suspended, then slowly slid to the side before stopping again. Tyler took out his phone and started filming. Suddenly, we noticed 3 lights, 2 more farther off and lower than the first. They moved in a strange pattern, pulling together, and then separately. Jordan cracked a joke about the lights signaling "go away" in Morse code, but nobody laughed. A weird feeling settled in my gut. We weren't scared, exactly, but it felt like we were somewhere we shouldn't be. The lights seemed to be watching us, not the other way around. Tyler decided to get a better view by flying his drone over the field. He tapped record, and we all crouched down to stay out of the shot. When the drone reached about 30 feet high, something bizarre happened. The lights shifted instantly, not by fading or blinking, but by moving sideways with perfect synchronization. The entire sky above the field shimmered like heat rising from asphalt, and then the lights zipped into that shimmer and vanished completely. The drone feed cut out immediately, going black. Tyler manually brought the drone down. It landed without any damage, but something was off. The battery read full, and the camera wasn't working. We hiked back to the house quickly, each of us lost in thought. No one wanted to admit what we'd seen, hoping someone would suggest it was just a prank or an illusion. At home, Tyler plugged the drone into his laptop. The footage showed only static where the lights had been, with the rest of the video appearing normal. Then things got stranger. He discovered over a minute of light footage from his phone, recorded before the drone even launched. But when he tried to view it, the file was completely gone. No thumbnail, no corrupted version, nothing in the cloud backup. Jordan experienced the same thing. His side video froze when he tried to open it, then rebooted with the clip missing entirely. I hadn't recorded anything, but when I checked my phone, I found a new unfamiliar notification about remote access, timestamped at 9:58, and I hadn't downloaded anything that day. We left soon after, the street unusually quiet. Driving home with the radio low, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, knowing how irrational I was being. Nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd been marked somehow, watched by something we couldn't understand. The next morning at school, everything seemed normal, but nothing felt the same. Something felt off. The atmosphere was tense. Tyler looked exhausted, constantly checking his phone as if it might vanish. Miles mentioned hearing strange clicking sounds through his phone speaker overnight. Jordan reported his Wi-Fi had mysteriously disconnected at 3 a.m., despite no issues for other household members. Later that day, near the senior parking lot's chain-link fence, I spotted a man in a crisp black suit. Clean-shaven, wearing a white shirt and black tie, dark sunglasses obscuring his eyes. He stood motionless, slowly pacing, staring intently at the parked cars. He walked away without a word, disappearing around the gym's corner. When I mentioned this to Tyler during lunch, when silent, his mother had discovered something unsettling that morning, a single set of boot prints near their backyard fence, size 12 or 13, in a straight line. No other tracks, no disturbed ground. We agreed to stop discussing the incident at school. The videos had vanished. The drone footage was useless. We had nothing concrete, but strange occurrences continued. Jordan's email account locked him out, supposedly accessed from Virginia. Miles's car alarm triggered precisely at 2:17 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights. Tyler abandoned bringing his laptop to school, claiming it wouldn't charge even when plugged in. One afternoon, I returned home to find my bedroom window open, which I distinctly remembered locking that morning. Nothing seemed displaced, but my phone now sat on the windowsill instead of its charger. About a week later, I encountered him again. After practice, around 5:30 p.m. with darkness falling, I crossed the grass near the side lot. There he stood, partially hidden under the bleachers, motionless, hands clasped, waiting. I didn't stop, didn't look, just got in my car and drove away. 2 months after the strange incident, Tyler moved to Missouri. His mom claimed it was for her job, but something didn't feel right. He disappeared from our group chat without a proper goodbye. The drone still sits in a shoebox under Miles's bed, untouched since that night. It was a sticky August evening just after sunset. I launched the drone from my backyard on the edge of a small valley in western Oregon, surrounded by forest and a few weathered radio towers on the ridge. A friend had recommended Hilltop 6, a spot promising a clear 360D view without power lines or cell towers, perfect for long-range video. Around 7:15 p.m., I packed the drone and drove up the narrow gravel road to an old logging trail. I set up on a flat dirt patch about 200 yards below T Towers. Silence surrounded me, broken only by cicadas and distant highway traffic. I completed my pre-flight checklist. Props locked, battery full, GPS locked. The drone rose to 150 feet, hovering steadily. My tablet's live feed showed crisp golden light fading to blue. Douglas firs outlined sharply against the sky. After a few minutes of smooth pan shots, I decided to climb higher to 300 feet and tilt the camera down toward the road. A split-second joystick tap made the feed stutter. Suddenly, it locked up completely, a grey pixelated mess like digital snow. I hit the emergency hover button. The drone beeped, but the screen remained static. Tablet in hand, I sprinted up the trail, watching the blinking red signal strength meter. At the ridge base, I paused and pointed the tablet toward the drone's last known location. The grey static finally gave way to a live image. I saw the ground dropping away, and at the frame's edge, something dark and slick-streaked beneath the drone. Rewinding in slow motion revealed a long, slender shape, smooth as oil, slicing past the lens at nearly 100 miles an hour. No wings, no rotors, just a dark blur like a shark. We never saw the lights again. I was out flying my drone, cruising through the air, when something strange caught my eye. The video feed had just a few missing frames, but in those captured moments, I saw a shape that defied explanation. It moved with impossible precision. No shadow, no downdraft, just pure motion. Without hesitation, I set the drone to return home, watching it trace back along its GPS route. My heart was pounding. I'd logged hundreds of flights and never witnessed anything like this. The wind was light, ruling out any random gusts. There weren't even birds big enough to cause such an anomaly. As the drone touched down and locked its motors, I hastily packed up, forgetting to disengage the geofell. Now, just then, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. The number was blocked, with no caller ID or country code, completely untraceable. Thinking it was probably a telemarketing glitch, I played the message in my car. Quiet breathing preceded a smooth, low male voice. "We need you to stop flying near Hilltop 6. You've seen enough." Then a click, static and silence. I sat under a broken streetlight, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Scrolling through my recent calls revealed nothing. No message from my service provider, no entry in the call log. The voicemail interface showed it as new, but any attempt to interact resulted in an error. The drive home was eerily quiet. Empty roads stretched before me, and I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights. Nothing. Back home, I connected the drone controller to my laptop to download the footage. The entire first flight was intact. The panning ridge, sunset glow, and those few glitch frames showing a dark streak smeared across the video like ink. I exported the clip to a separate folder and shut down the software. Sleep was elusive. The voicemail replayed in my mind, that flat command about Hilltop 6, sounding like I'd already agreed to comply. Around 2 a.m., I got up for water and noticed my phone screen glowing. No new notifications, but the voicemail icon blinked again. Tapping it only resulted in a spinning load that never completed. The next morning, I dove into researching airspace restrictions around Hilltop 6. FAA charts showed only Class G airspace, completely uncontrolled. No military zones, no restricted altitudes. Something wasn't adding up. I pulled off the dirt road onto the gravel lot beside Mirror Lake just after 10 that Friday night. The moon was almost full, bright enough to light the pines, but dim against the low fog rolling in off the water. I scanned online forums for other drone pilots, finding nothing about strange objects or mysterious warnings. Determined to get a clean shot of the ridge, I returned that night and parked at my usual spot at 7 p.m. I set up the drone and climbed the trail, adjusting the camera to face west toward the sunset and leveling it out straight. The drone rose smoothly to 200 feet, then 250 with a stable feed and no glitches. I hovered for a minute, watching the hillside lighten in the last rays of sunlight. At exactly 7:23, everything changed. The feed flickered to gray static, and I caught a glimpse of a dark blur beneath the drone, moving even faster than before. Just 2 frames of shape, and then complete signal loss. My controller buzzed with an alert as I hit return to home and scanned the sky. Nothing moved, no blinking lights, no contrails, just an empty slope of pine trees tinted orange by the fading light. When the drone landed, I removed my goggles and stared at the ridge, half expecting someone to emerge from the trees. The launch area showed no signs of disturbance, no footprints, no movements. I packed up quickly, my heart racing. During the drive home, my phone rang twice from a private number. I didn't answer. The voicemail was chilling. "We told you to stop. This is your final warning." The same calm, distant voice sent chills down my spine. In a panic, I deleted everything. Phone files, drone controller, laptop video, even tearing up my FAA map. The next morning, I sold the drone and controller on Craigslist for half price, claiming video issues. I shipped it to a random PO box in Nevada, wanting to be rid of it completely. Now I still think about that moment, the silent shape zipping through my live feed, the mysterious men in black who never appeared in any call logs. I don't return to Hilltop 6. I don't fly drones anymore. And sometimes, late at night, I could swear I hear a soft hum in the breeze like a distant rotor, except there's nothing but stars. The lake was eerily still that night, a sheet of black glass stretching out before me. I'd driven 2 hours from Salt Creek, chasing reports of strange atmospheric lights that had been buzzing around local conversations. My camera gear was ready, a DSLR on a tripod and my smartphone as backup, settling onto a cooler with my coffee. I listened to the wind whispering through cedar trees and distant duck splashes. At 10:17, something changed. A faint shimmer appeared on the far side of the lake, just above the tree line, a thin, almost electric blue line that curved upward in a short semicircle before vanishing. I switched to video mode on my phone, panning across the scene while my DSLR captured steady footage. Over the next 5 minutes, lights began emerging along the ridge. They were pale white with hints of green or amber, moving in wildly unpredictable patterns. Imagine laser-pointer designs dancing behind a screen, loops, zigzags, small spirals. 2 lights even performed a synchronized dance, crossing paths and reversing direction. The excitement was electric. I tracked a bright orb gliding above the pine trees, marveling at its fluid motion. No strobing, no blinking, just pure, smooth movement like someone drawing with light itself. After about 10 minutes, the lights gradually faded, returning the lake to darkness. I reviewed the phone clip. Trees and wavering orbs were all that remained. Satisfied, I packed away the phone, but left the DSLR recording a bit longer to catch water reflections. Around 10:35, as I reached for my phone, something felt off. The hair on my arm stood up. In the preview window, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A dark shape had stepped 2 feet to my right, casting a slight shadow on the cooler. I thought it might be a swaying brer. A trick of the light? But when I tapped to play full screen, I was working late, reviewing footage from my camera by the lake. A dark figure had caught my attention, standing just outside the camera's soft focus, facing the water. I hadn't heard a thing. No footsteps, no movement behind me. Frame by frame, I studied the clip. The man appeared for barely a second, exactly 17 frames, then vanished. His posture was rigid, walking up, turning toward me, then stepping back out of view. I zoomed in on the image, but his face remained a blur, just a dark oval under a fedora. No reflections from glasses or metal, no distinguishable features. The emptiness made my stomach sink. I glanced over my shoulder. Moonlight revealed only pine trees and fog. My cooler swayed slightly in the breeze. I leaned closer, sniffing the air, hearing nothing but wind and water. I tried convincing myself it was just a late-night walker, maybe a park ranger. But something about the suit, the way he appeared, didn't feel right. My drive home was silent, empty roads cutting through misty landscapes. Back in my apartment, I transferred the DSLR footage to my computer. The lights were clear and steady, but no figure existed in the video. just my camera swinging to catch the final lake shimmer, then settling on the tripod as I packed up. Only one lens had captured him, with no secondary angle for confirmation. I considered returning to confront whoever it was, but each time I imagined crossing that dark lot, I saw him stepping out from the pines watching me, so I stayed away. Tuesday arrived. At my IT firm, working as a systems analyst, the receptionist announced a visitor around 3 p.m., unexpected. I walked to the lobby. There he stood, same black suit, same dark fedora, hands perfectly positioned at his sides. No identification, no accessories, just standing, staring through the glass door. When I entered, he looked up. His eyes remained shadowed, but an unsettling calm radiated from him, like a predator assessing its prey. "Ellis?" he asked. I nodded, one finger pressed against his lips. Silently, he opened a leather-bound folder on the counter, revealing a single typed page, Observations. Subject: Light Phenomena at Mirror Lake. He walked out without another word, his soft voice hitting me like a slap. "Reflections can be dangerous," he had said. The receptionist looked up at me, brows furrowed as the door closed behind him. I'd backed off earlier when he extended the folder toward me like a plate, no expression on his face. "Transfer the files to me, we'll discuss terms," he'd insisted. I shook my head. I can't. The scene in the waiting area had been surreal. A woman stared at her phone. The receptionist pretended to file papers. No one paid attention when he tapped the folder and said, "I'm an interested party in Reflections. I'd like to know what you've seen." Now, back at my desk, my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Don't share those videos." I haven't shared them. The footage sits on a hidden drive. I haven't returned to Mirror Lake. But late at night, when the power flickers, I swear I see shapes moving in the glass. Faint glimmers behind my window like pale lights repeating the patterns I filmed. Once, on the security cam outside my apartment, I thought I saw someone in a dark suit standing under the street lamp, backlit by fog before the frame went static. It began on the Weatherford Trail, just as the mist lifted off the pines. A black sedan sat sideways across the single track, engine ticking hot, tires sunk an inch into the dirt. No plates, no decals, just a sleek, unmarked car with closed doors and dark windows. I'd started hiking before sunrise, hoping to reach Shelter Rock by noon. 20 feet out, I stopped, swallowed water, and tried to make sense of it. No footprints beyond mine, no keys on the hood. The engine was still warm enough that heat wisped off the metal like breath. Suddenly, my focus shifted. What if someone was hurt or trapped inside? I needed to pee, and the thought of a potential victim nagged at me. I stepped forward, boots sinking into soft earth, and peered through the passenger window. The front seat was empty, no purse, backpack, or phone. The glove box remained closed, the center console latched. I knocked softly on the glass, then harder. No response. When I tried the door handle, it clicked but wouldn't open, as if locked. Crouching down, I shined my flashlight into the back seat. A single military green nylon duffel bag sat zipped shut, resting like someone had just set it down moments before. No signs of blood or struggle, just the bag. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but a sense of responsibility kept me there. I set my pack down and reached for my phone to call the ranger station at Cold Spring Camp. No reception. I tried again. Nothing. I snapped photos of the license plate area, just blank metal, and circled to the driver's side. Same situation, locked, empty, but the engine was warm. Sunlight was growing stronger, reaching the ridge, unzipping the duffel bag. I found 3 rolled black shirts, a pair of dark socks, and a thin envelope stamped "Not for public release," sealed with no name or date. I quickly returned everything, zipped the bag, and left it on the roof before returning to my pack. I debated whether to carry the bag down for help. It was heavy and awkward, and I didn't know what might be in that mysterious envelope. I didn't want responsibility for potentially dangerous contents, so I tucked my phone into airplane mode and decided to hike to the next T-junction, about 3 miles down, where a signal sometimes came through. On the way, an unsettling feeling crept over me, eyes watching, though no person was visible. I stopped twice, spinning in circles. Only trees, rocks, and shifting shadows surrounded me. At the junction, I paused by the big granite outcrop where hikers carved their names. 1 bar of signal appeared. I dialed park headquarters. 2 rings and voicemail. Ranger Salazar, if urgent, press 1. After a couple of rings and some static, I reported finding the car, noted the warm engine, and mentioned the sealed, not for public release envelope. Please send someone, I said, then ended the call. I spent the morning hiking a remote trail, stopping to rest on a boulder. Fog drifted through pine trees as I ate a granola bar. My phone buzzed 30 minutes later, an unknown number with a cryptic message. Turn back. No caller ID, no voicemail. I deleted it and waited 20 minutes. No parked vehicle appeared. Back on the trail toward my car, my stomach twisted with unease. Something felt off, like I'd stumbled into a scene not meant for me. The clearing was empty. My car had vanished, leaving only disturbed ground where it had been parked. The duffel bag felt lighter now, nothing inside rattling. By late afternoon, I reached Cold Spring Camp. The ranger station was an aging A-frame cabin, with 2 windows and a sliding door. Inside, Ranger Perkins sat behind a worn desk, sorting maps. I explained everything, the car, the envelope, the strange message. She frowned and consulted a logbook, slowly flipping pages. No interference reports today, she said flatly. When I pointed to the envelope, she tapped the desk. Trail cameras had been glitching near the ridge, experiencing weird electrical interference, but nothing about missing vehicles. I asked what interference meant. She explained it could involve radio jamming, GPS disruption, or drone control issues near the communication towers. I told her the car was gone. She promised to send someone to investigate in the morning and stored the duffel bag in a locker. That night, I stayed in a basic camper cabin, just a cot and a propane heater. At dusk, I walked to the picnic tables. Communication towers loomed overhead, their red lights blinking. Drinking instant coffee, my mind kept circling back to the car, the shirts, the cryptic envelope label. Around 9 p.m., the door rattled. 2 men in impeccably pressed black suits stood outside the porch light. No badges, no identification, nothing connecting them to park services. They looked ordinary, except for their clothing. I rolled into Pine Creek Station around 11 p.m. on a chilly late October night, the gravel lot barely visible through the settling river fog. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting a dim glow. My gas tank was nearly empty, and I was done playing chicken with the fuel gauge. As I stepped out, my breath hung in the cold air. The station was deserted except for a single overhead lamp near the pump. Not long after I arrived, 2 men approached me. The taller one greeted me with a polite but distant evening, while the shorter one cut right to the point. They wanted information about reported interference. I mentioned Ranger Perkins had just taken a duffel bag and mentioned something about GPS jamming. They seemed unsurprised, as if they'd already heard this. The tall one pressed further, asking if I'd noticed anything unusual, lights, sounds, anything off the trail. I recounted finding my car's engine warm when I returned, though the vehicle itself was gone. The shorter man raised his hand, palm out, and curtly said, "Thank you. That will be all." No smile, no further questions. They stood rigidly, then turned and walked down the path toward the station, disappearing into the darkness without flashlights. The night remained still, with only crickets and pine needles moving in the breeze. I locked the cabin door and went to sleep. By morning, the duffel bag had vanished from the locker. Ranger Perkins denied ever seeing it, and the logbook showed no interference report. The trail crew found no trace of my car, and the GPS logs on my phone were blank. I'd checked myself. I hiked out early that day, bypassing Shelter Rock and taking the main road back to town. At home, I installed a new lock on my backpack and trashed the envelope photo. Now, I sometimes drive past that logging road and glance up at Tower Ridge. There's nothing there, no traffic, no parked cars, no mysterious men, just quiet forest and the distant town hum. But occasionally, my phone buzzes with a message from an unknown number, which I never open. I was just trying to fill up my car at this late-night gas station when something felt off. 2 identical black sedans flanked the lot, perfectly positioned on opposite sides. Each car had tinted windows and sat motionless, with an eerily similar driver inside, both wearing crisp, dark suits, sunglasses, completely still. I called out softly, hoping for some response, but neither man moved. They seemed almost like statues, positioned with military-like precision. When I finished pumping gas, I went inside to pay. Derek, the young clerk who always worked late shifts, seemed unaware of anything unusual. He casually mentioned that people sometimes park overnight, suggesting they might be hunters. Back outside, I noticed the cars hadn't changed position. My instincts were on high alert. As I pulled out onto the cracked pavement, something strange happened. Both sedans came to life simultaneously, their taillights brightening and engines rumbling. They pulled out right behind me, maintaining a consistent 30-foot distance. The whole scenario felt choreographed. Two identical cars, two identical drivers, moving with an unnatural synchronization that sent chills down my spine. I gripped the steering wheel, hyper-aware of their presence in my rearview mirror, wondering what their intentions could be. The fog wrapped around me as I drove north on Route 89, my headlights cutting a thin path through the darkness. Two sedans appeared suddenly, one turning left, the other right onto a small road leading to the river crossing. Something felt off. I blinked hard, slowing to a crawl, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But when I looked again, the road was empty. No cars, no skid marks, no fading headlights, just black pavement reflecting my tail lights. I exhaled sharply, almost blowing the fog off my rear window. Flipping on the defroster, I gripped the wheel and continued driving, my speed barely touching 30 miles per hour. For the next 15 miles, not a single vehicle crossed my path. No trucks, no distant headlight glimmers. The radio dial brought only static, with an old country station sputtering in and out, playing nothing I recognized. I rolled down the windows, hearing only the engine and wind pulling at the fog's edges. Passing Goldridge Road Junction, I considered stopping to check my mirrors, but couldn't bring myself to step into that black mist. Home was all I wanted, my warm apartment, some daylight. At mile marker 103, the fog suddenly lifted. Streetlights appeared. Clusters of homes with lit windows welcomed me. I pulled into my driveway at exactly 12:07 a.m. No cars. No footprints in the gravel. Leaning back, I tried to steady my breathing. Morning would bring clarity, I told myself. I'd surely dreamed the whole thing. But the next workday changed everything. A receipt in my purse from Pine Creek Station was dated 11:09 p.m., 9 minutes later than I remembered. My coworker confirmed I was always punctual and that receipts print in real time. Yet I clearly remembered pumping gas and paying before 11:05. The receipt showed Pump 2, the one nearest that first sedan with its engine off. What was I doing there at 11:09? That weekend, I returned in daylight. The station looked different. Rusty pumps. The neon sign gone. Something had changed, but what? The gravel lot where Pine Creek Station once stood was now just an empty shell, concrete walls, broken windows, no trace of the two sedans I remembered. No security cameras, no barrier arms, just scattered tufts of grass pushing through cracks. I'd filled my tank at a nearby chain station, paid exactly $20, keeping the quiet rhythm of everyday life moving forward. Yet every time I drive past, my eyes are drawn to that spot, wondering about those who might have been behind those dark windows that night. Just before midnight, I stepped onto my back deck. The May air was cool, the sky crystal clear with stars scattered like bright pinpricks. Hours earlier, I'd been curled up with a book, but a glance out the window caught the full moon hanging fat over the maple tree. Quickly, I grabbed my phone and dashed outside. Night mode on, I positioned it on the rail and aimed at the glowing orb. My hands were steady. I'd photographed the moon countless times, always capturing those familiar pale craters and soft luminescence. This time was different. Midway through focusing, something darted across the moon's surface. Not a bird, not a cloud, a dark shape sliding in a perfectly straight line, silent and smooth, slicing the lunar disk for just a moment. I snapped the photo and immediately checked it. The moon looked pristine except for a black slash across the top third, like a marker line drawn precisely. Zooming in revealed a subtle curve no solid edges, more like an out-of-place shadow. Switching to my brother's borrowed Canon DSLR, I set up the tripod and captured 3 more shots. Each image showed the moon perfectly intact, save for that strange line appearing in the same spot, shifting imperceptibly. A thrill ran through me. Maybe a bat or bug had crossed the lens, but the line was too crisp, too deliberate. I stepped back, scanning the sky through my binoculars. The moon was unblemished, bright, whole, silent. No planes, no birds, just maple branches swaying gently. The next morning during my coffee break, I transferred the images to my laptop. The dark curve remained, slicing through each frame. I stared at the pixels, my curiosity growing with each careful examination. I bumped up the exposure, and the curve took on a faint metallic sheen, while the rest of the shot remained unchanged. There were no other anomalies in the sky, nothing else unusual. At lunch I showed Mark the photo, and he suggested it looked like a volcanic shadow, a plume drifting in front of the moon. But there hadn't been any eruptions in weeks. We laughed about a lunar eclipse gone wrong, though I noticed his brow creasing. That evening I printed the photo on glossy paper and clipped it to the fridge with a snail-shaped magnet, my only decoration. Before bed, I stared at the black arc glaring across the bright moon. The house was quiet, and I drifted off around 11:15. Morning brought a plain white envelope on the kitchen counter, no return address or stamp. Inside was my identical photo, but someone had torn out the curved section across the moon, leaving a jagged semicircle. The missing chunk matched exactly the black curve I'd seen. My heart raced as I turned the photo over. Blank matte paper, no notes. Holding it to the light, I could see my floral countertop through the hole. The torn edge felt fresh and fine. Brows as if cut just an hour ago. I checked the front door locked, windows closed. I'd come straight home from work yesterday with no stops. The envelope must have appeared after midnight or before I woke up. My phone buzzed with routine notifications, a weather alert for afternoon showers, a news headline about a minor train delay. Nothing about lunar shadows or stolen photos. Then I noticed that the original print was gone, with only the snail magnet marking its empty spot. Jumping, I checked behind the fridge. Nothing. No scraps, no fragments, just a smooth metal surface. I wrapped the torn photo in an envelope and stuffed it in my bag. At work, time crawled. My screen felt too bright, my chair too stiff. Every time I considered stepping outside, I imagined someone watching, waiting to slip away the real photo and leave that blank moon postcard. After dinner, I walked the dog, constantly looking over my shoulder. I clipped Scout's leash on as lavender crept across the sky, the sun still hidden behind low clouds. Early May, cool and damp after 2 days of rain. My home sits where sidewalks dissolve into pine forests, so morning walks often lead us into the woods before returning. That particular morning, we followed a narrow path skirting backyards, threading under tangled alder branches. Scout nosed a stump while I shivered in my hoodie, finishing the last of my travel mug. A thin mist rose between tree trunks like a gossamer veil. Suddenly, Scout froze. Perfectly still, he tugged against the leash, ears pricked. When I looked up, a soft glow drifted just above the treetops, maybe 30 feet high, oval and pale yellow-white, like a street lamp wrapped in silk. No wings, no sound. It didn't move so much as slide, slow, smooth, sliding toward a clearing in the pines. My heart skipped. I lifted my phone, but the moment I did, later that night, I entered the block, trying to clear my head. The moon hung high, full and unmarred. No shadows crossed its surface. Streetlights cast halos through humid air with no figures interrupting their glow. Neighborhood houses looked ordinary. Kids' bikes in driveways, laundry flapping on lines. Home again, I checked my camera bag. Both memory cards were present. Holding those moonshots, connecting the DSLR to my laptop, I scrolled through. The arc appeared in every image. I copied raw files to a backup drive, hands trembling. Late that night, a soft rustle near the window caught my attention. Peering out, I saw only leaves brushing in the wind. Leaning closer, I glimpsed movement, a dark shape slipping away from the fence. I blinked. The yard stood empty. Maple trees swayed, a single leaf brushing the glass. I went to bed, leaving the torn photo on the nightstand. Moonlight slanted through blinds, illuminating the cutout like a keyhole. I stared until my eyes grew heavy. No more envelopes have arrived. I haven't reprinted the photo, but those raw files remain hidden on the backup drive. And sometimes, when the moon rises in that exact position over the maple, I half expect to see that shadow flicker across it again, silent, wingless, precise, and wonder who else might be watching. The day started normally, but something felt off from the moment we entered the woods. Scout, usually eager to explore, suddenly stopped and stared intently at a spot where the light had just vanished behind the trees. I tried coaxing him forward, but he refused to move, sitting down hard and dragging the leash. When I knelt beside him, the path looked completely empty. No tracks, no footprints in the mud. I switched my phone's flashlight to camera mode and slowly panned around. My hand trembled as I took a single photo, capturing only grey trees and moss. Nothing seemed unusual. I unhipped Scout's harness, letting him run ahead as we headed back. I kept turning around, half expecting to see some strange glow emerging from the forest, but nothing followed us. Back in the yard, an unsettling feeling lingered. My skin crawled as if unseen eyes watched me from every room's corners. That night, I set up old Wi-Fi security cameras near the front door. I tested their angles carefully and went to bed around 10:30 with scouts sleeping at my feet. The cameras were set to record any motion. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification. Camera 1 had detected motion at 3:17 a.m. My heart sank as I opened the footage. Most clips were blank, just black screens, but one 4-second clip from camera 1 remained. The grainy, black and white footage showed the front porch. The timestamp flickered in the corner. Twice. The doorbell rang slowly and deliberately. The shot widened, revealing two figures standing close together under the streetlight's dim glow. They wore identical dark suits, crisp white shirts, polished shoes, with neat hair and no hats. Something about their presence sent chills down my spine. The night was heavy with uncertainty. At 3:17 a.m., my security camera captured two figures standing motionless at my door. Their heads were tilted down, shoes gleaming, shoulders rigid. No badges, no briefcases, just two men in black suits, perfectly still against the backdrop of flashing doorbell lights. My hands trembled as I set down the phone. Scouts stirred on the bed behind me. I checked the hallway light off. The front door loomed in darkness, a silent threat I couldn't bear to face. Desperate for connection, I texted a friend to come over, offering no explanation. He rang the doorbell twice, testing something unspoken, then left. The day dragged, weighted with an unseen presence. I rewound the morning's video feed repeatedly. Every camera was blank, except for that single haunting 4-second clip. I downloaded it, emailed it to myself, then deleted and reinstalled the app. The blank cameras remained unchanged. That night, I unplugged the cameras, replacing the red bulb with a cheap desk lamp. Scout slept beside me, the door left unlocked. I couldn't face listening for bells at 3 a.m. I woke at 2:45 to rain pattering on the porch roof and drifted back to sleep. At 3:17, I jolted awake, alert but hearing only raindrops. Scout breathed steadily beside me. In the morning, I studied the clip again, those two shadowy figures etched in my memory. I considered destroying the evidence, but instead saved the file to a USB key, locking it away in my desk drawer. Each morning, I walked Scout past the pine's edge, careful not to stop in the clearing, avoiding my phone, ignoring any potential lights. I tell myself it was just a glitch, a prank, but Scout's eyes still dart to the tree line when we pass, and late at night, a soft, quiet doorbell seems to echo through the rain like a distant, ominous promise. Earlier that day, I'd been wiping down the counter at Black Rock Cafe as the sun sank behind the ridge. Outside, the sky over the old quarry turned a bruised purple, exactly how people described seeing strange lights bouncing off the limestone walls. The rumors had been circulating all night, flash stories of unexplained phenomena. Nothing seemed unusual until John, a customer, leaned in and shared a strange story. Driving home past Miller's Pit, he'd seen orange spheres hovering silently over the rocky landscape. They just hung there before vanishing. As I steamed milk for his espresso, half listening, he described the spheres as massive, 15 feet wide. He tried to photograph them, but the moment he hit record, the lights flickered as if avoiding documentation. The cafe was nearly empty when a man in a crisp sea suit entered. No tie, polished shoes gleaming under the neon sign. He didn't order anything or even glance my way. Instead, he walked directly to John's table and sat down opposite him. The fluorescent lights seemed to dim as he arrived. John froze mid-sip, looking confused. "Can I help you?" he asked. The stranger stared back, hands flat on the table, shoulders rigid. Without greeting or explanation, he asked in a mechanical voice, "Tell me about the lights." John stammered, explaining the orange orbs he'd seen hovering over the back roads near abandoned cabins. The man listened intently, not taking notes, just nodding occasionally. His gaze never left John. I watched nervously from behind the counter, my heart racing. John seemed increasingly uncomfortable. When he finished his drink, he abruptly stood, saying he needed to leave. The stranger remained motionless. Before exiting, John looked over at me and gave a small, meaningful wave as if signaling something about the mysterious man. I nodded back, dropping the tip jar into the register, trying to appear calm while my mind raced with questions about what had just happened. I drove Route 47 under a bruised sky, windows down despite the chill. The quarry lay silent and dark, a single street lamp casting a distant glow. Earlier, the cafe had been strange. John hurrying out after a meeting with a man in black who spoke with an unsettling robotic flatness. My hands still shook from the earlier encounter. I'd watched John leave, then seen the booth empty moments later. The cafe was quiet, just a hint of cinnamon and espresso lingering in the air. I'd locked up, flipped the close sign, and driven home with an uneasy feeling. At home, I turned on every light, fighting an inexplicable sense of unease. John's text sat on my phone, the only message. I considered texting back, asking if he was okay, but hesitated. What could I even say? The laptop fan clicked too loudly, everything feeling mechanical and strange. Sleep was impossible. I watched the clock, 10:03 p.m. Then 1 a.m. every creak sounded like footsteps on gravel. I imagined someone might knock, might be watching. Outside, soft headlights passed. A dark shape at the window turned out to be just the neighbor's cat. Morning came weak and pale. I brewed coffee, adding too much cream to make it sweet. I considered calling John, wondering if he'd seen the man again or experienced strange lights, but I didn't. At 7:15, I left for my shift, taking the same route past the quiet quarry. The local news showed nothing unusual. Municipal meetings, a high school band story, a missing cat. No mention of suits, secret meetings, or anything out of the ordinary. Yet something felt off, hovering just beyond explanation. Headlights sliced through the dense mist, pine trees standing sentinel on both sides. I parked in the cafe lot, taking a deep breath before entering. The door chime announced my arrival. Sitting down my keys, I forced a smile for the morning crowd. Regulars occupied the counter, but no tense suits or suspicious stares. The neon sign flickered to life as I wiped the bar top, my mind drifting to the man who might be out there in the fog, watching and waiting. Marisol, a customer, noticed my weariness. "You okay?" she asked. "Long night." I shrugged. She nodded and sipped her cappuccino. My eyes wandered to the empty booth where John and the stranger had sat earlier. A prickle ran down my neck. The feeling of being watched. I scanned the window, only mist and streetlights. Turning back, I tossed my cloth into the rag bin. The espresso machine hissed as I prepared the next batch. Overhead lights felt harsh, almost oppressive. I considered closing early, but opted for mellow jazz instead. Lunch passed without incitus. Dent. No mentions of quarry lights or mysterious men in suits. It was as if last night had been erased, a collective agreement to remain silent. By evening, the strange encounter had faded into a distant memory. At 9:15, I locked up, set the alarm, and walked to my car. The sky had cleared, stars glinting like pinpricks of light. Driving away, I caught my reflection. Dark eyes, pale face, an unresolved question hanging in the air. I didn't look back. Headlights cutting through the dissipating fog, anticipating something that would blur the lines between reality and perception. Earlier that night, just after midnight, I'd been up on Eagle Ridge. My old Jeep navigated the service road at dusk, parking beside the weathered plywood shack I'd built last summer. I'd carefully set up my Celestron 8 telescope on its Dobsonian mount. The air was cool but comfortable, no heavy coat needed. A clear sky stretched above, no moon, just a few planets and thousands of stars. My focus was fixed on an unremarkable point in Cygnus, a star I'd been tracking for months. Amateur astronomers called it the blink star. When magnification exceeded 200 times, it would mysteriously vanish for seconds before reappearing. The night had been quiet until now. I'd seen the star blink before, usually dismissing such occurrences as atmospheric interference or equipment malfunction. But something felt different this time. At 250x magnification, I focused until the star appeared razor-sharp. Initial observation seemed routine. 3 blinks within the first minute. Nothing unusual. Then, around 12:13 a.m., the star vanished. 20 seconds later, it reappeared. I meticulously logged the switching to 300x. I watched it blink again. After the third reappearance, the eyepiece went completely dark. I double-checked everything. Lens cap was off. I swapped eyepieces, but dead blackness remained. My heart raced as I peered through the finderscope. The sky looked normal, every star in its place except the blink star was gone. The mount's red LED blinked slowly, power cable secure. I pressed the override button and the computers flickered. The motor hummed and the star field returned, but no blink star. Desperate, I attached my smartphone adapter and snapped a photo. Processing revealed a field of diamond-like stars, yet the specific spot remained empty. When I looked up with my naked eyes, a soft orange glow hovered behind the pine-covered ridge. Initially, I mistook it for headlights or a hiker's lantern, but it remained stationary for 5 minutes before fading. Oddities continued to accumulate. My watch was 2 minutes slow, despite always syncing before leaving. My phone still read 12:19, but the NTP server showed no connection. Cell service was dead. I tried my ham radio, Alpha Sierra, November. Does anyone copy? Only static answered, even on the lower power repeater channel. My fingers grew numb as I prodded at my phone. Camera, weather app, compass, all frozen. The home button vibrated uselessly. A full reboot reset the clock to 12:20 a.m. to my shock. The gallery was empty. My earlier blink star photos had vanished without a trace. As the sky began to pale, I loaded the broken telescope into the back of my Jeep. The valley was still, with no ridge glow, no radio, no blinking star. I'd been up on the ridge since around 7 p.m., though time seemed unreliable. Driving down the gravel road with low beam headlights, I struggled to navigate each turn. My phone's GPS showed no signal, and offline maps offered no guidance. After taking 2 wrong forks, I finally found the main road by pure chance and headed home. The dashboard clock read 6:02 a.m., matching the sunrise when I pulled into my driveway. I sat breathing hard. Then, telescope's eyepiece shards contained in a paper bag on the passenger seat. My notebook lay open in the glove box, filled with scribbled times, intervals, and a single note. Ridge light glow lasted 5 minutes. Inside the quiet house, my phone finally got service. 8 missed calls from my brother, and 1 from an unknown number greeted me. When I called him back, he mentioned texting about dinner. I apologized, but he found it strange. Claiming I'd already answered his first call at 7 a.m., I insisted I was fine. Checking my inbox revealed no texts from the unknown number and no voicemail. The photos remaining in my camera's memory card showed shaky shots of a star and flickers of darkness, with every file inexplicably stamped as imgl.jpg. I dropped the eyepiece into my desk drawer, rubbed my eyes, and glanced at the clock. 6:35 a.m., the star I'd been tracking, Cygnus, had vanished, replaced by pre-dawn haze. Earlier, I'd been on the ridge with my telescope, heart pounding. The ridge light hadn't returned, and the sky remained untouched. I'd disconnected the power cable, switched to manual mode, and aimed at the recorded coordinates. The mount groaned. The star field looked correct, but the star was missing again. Checking my truck's clock. 11:17, though I couldn't trust its accuracy, I decided to pack up and head down. While storing the scope, the mount snagged and refused to move. A forceful tug made it slam against the plywood, shattering the eyepiece. When I yanked the power cord, silence descended. I pulled off the gravel road just before sunrise, engine ticking as it cooled. The morning fog blanketed my cornfield, so thick I couldn't see its far edge. With my thermos and flashlight in hand, I locked the truck and headed out to check the irrigation lines I'd laid last week. The air was rich with damp earth and green stalks. Walking between the rows, something NG caught my eye. The corn was missing. At first I thought I'd mixed up where the new lines ran. But as I got closer, the stalks ended in perfectly straight lines. Crouching down, I ran my hand over the cut stalks. They were smooth with even shears about waist high. The flattened area formed a precise hexagon, each side exactly equal in length. I swept my flashlight over the ground. Every stalk leaned at the same angle, pressed into the soil as if someone had ironed it flat. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing to show how anyone could have entered or left. Standing up, I circled the pattern. The fog smothered all sound. Even the birds were silent. Looking back toward the farmhouse, still too distant to make out details, I sat on a cut stalk to gather my thoughts. My boots sank into the damp soil. Each step inside the flattened patch left a clear heel imprint, but outside those 6 sides the ground remained untouched. Not a single track crossed the perimeter. Walking back to the barn, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe a weather balloon or a malfunctioning drone could explain it. Bess, my black lab, spotted me at the door and ran out to greet me. Later that day, I drove up to the observatory to download the mount's logs. Perhaps they recorded power surges or firmware errors, but the control box was gone, wrenched off its shelf with rough gouges in the plywood walls. The mount itself had vanished, with only jagged metal shavings on the floor, marking where it had been. I walked back through the woods in the afternoon light. The ridge was still and empty. No hunters, no lights, no signs of equipment, just trees and rocks. Now, I still look up at the stars every night, but I don't return to Eagle Ridge. Occasionally, I catch a glimpse of a dim point that twitches, but I don't dwell on it. I tell friends I've lost interest in Blink Star. I tell myself that makes sense. And sometimes, in the darkest hour before dawn, I swear I hear the soft hum of a mount's motors spinning into place. But when I look, there's nothing there, just empty sky. I didn't blame her for wanting to leave. The dog sniffed at the flattened corn and whined, patting back toward the house. By mid-morning, the fog lifted and the sun burned off the last of the chill. I'd plowed hundreds of acres in my life, and I'd never seen anything like that hexagon. I refilled the water trough, tightened a loose bolt on the pump, and tried to call my neighbor Rick. No luck, just voicemail. I texted a photo from the field's edge, the corn stalks bent low and gleaming in the sunlight, though my phone showed no timestamp. Odd, but maybe the tower was just slow out here. At noon, I climbed into my pickup and packed 3 ice-cold sodas for later. The truck's AC was broken, so I drove with windows down, dust settling in the cab. My shirt was damp with sweat when I reached the equipment shed. I grabbed a wrench, ready to check the planter's drive belt. I always felt safer around machinery than around those snapped corn stumps. That's when I saw them. 2 men stepped out from the trees along the north field edge, 12 feet apart. They mirrored each other's stride, black suits, buttoned jackets, white shirts, narrow black ties, no bags, no hats. Their eyes were hidden in shadow, walking with that precise, measured pace of airport security guards. I froze, wrench in hand. They didn't hurry or greet me. They just reached the corner of the flattened patch and stopped. The taller one looked down at the bent stalks, then at me without expression. I set the wrench on a crate, wiped my hands on my jeans. "Can I help you fellas?" The shorter one tilted his head slightly. "Did anything change in the soil?" His voice was flat, practiced, like he was reading from a card. I pointed at the hexagon. "I've been farming this land for 20 years. The soil's soil. It gets compacted sometimes, but this..." I waved at the clean lines. "This isn't natural," the tall one agreed. "No tracks, no debris. A geometric flattening that suggested external pressure evenly applied." He crouched, ran a gloved finger across the soil. "Did you apply a herbicide?" I shook my head. "No, I'd have seen the signs on the monitor, but it'd kill the plants, not lay them down like this." The phone rang, but I didn't answer. Rick could wait. I was focused on the men who'd just walked through my field, their conversation clipped and tense. "The new lines run south of the east field. This is north," I told them. They nodded, as if confirming something already known. The shorter one asked about seismic activity, about overnight vibrations. I remembered the morning's calm fog. No sirens, no news of quakes. If something had shifted underground, I'd have seen cracked soil or ground upheaval. "Pipes wouldn't bend plants like that," I added. They exchanged a glance. The tall man spoke. "Stay off the area for 72 hours. Soil sample kits are en route." From his jacket, he pulled a plain white envelope stamped with an unfamiliar code. Inside, a single sheet listed test protocols, dated exactly 3 days ahead. No letterhead, no signature, just instructions to await a technician. I looked up. They were watching me intently. "Who are you?" I asked. "An appropriate liaison," he responded. Then they were gone, melting into the maple and oak beyond the field, leaving only birdsong behind. The sun climbed high, turning cornstalks yellow around the perimeter. I tucked the envelope in my back pocket, grabbed my wrench, and returned to the shed. Each few steps I glanced back. That evening, I discovered another folder in my toolbox. Same plain white paper, same cryptic code. Under the shop's fluorescent light, I noticed no adhesive, no staples. Someone had placed it there, unseen. Driving home on the lane road, dust billowing behind my truck, sweat cooling my neck, Best sat beside me, ears back. At the mailbox I paused, then tossed the envelope inside and slammed the lid. No witnesses. In my kitchen, instant coffee steaming. I flicked through channels, nothing but reruns and weather. The local news mentioned only a road closure 90 miles away. Something was happening, but what? The night was windless, stars overhead. The sky so clear you could trace the Milky Way above the southern dish. Just after 10 p.m. during my shift at Dry Mesa Radio Observatory, static began to crackle through the system. The dishes normally tracked cosmic noise and sunspots, producing mostly background hiss. At 10:17, something changed. The left-hand monitor sputtered into white noise, went silent for a moment, then snapped back with the faintest pulse, like a distant mic tap. I frowned and tapped the screen. No error messages appeared, and the other 3 dishes remained normal. I keyed the handheld radio. Control to dish 4. Anything on your end? Silence answered. While silence was typically comfortable out here, tonight it felt unnervingly deep. Standing, I crouched behind the shack and peered around the corner. Steel dishes sprawled across the plateau, each pointing at a different slice of sky. Moonlight glinted off their polished surfaces. No trucks, no lights, no wind disturbed the landscape. I forced a laugh and returned to my chair, logging the glitch in the shift log. At 11:03 p.m., something different happened. The same soft tapping sound emerged, now synchronized across all channels. I rushed to the dish controls and muted them. Static tapestries fell silent, leaving only the generator's hum. Then I saw it, a pale amber light like sea, a slow-burning ember, drifting just above the western horizon. Unlike a plane, it didn't zip or blink. Instead, it moved smoothly about 20 d above the mesa, heading south at what seemed like a walking pace, except impossibly high in the sky. Grabbing binoculars, I studied the light. Too small to determine its shape, it glowed gently. No headlight beam, no strobes, no contrail, just a single orb moving with strange deliberation. I switched to a telephoto lens, mounting it on the tripod and framing the horizon between two dishes. The light held steady, then dipped below the mesa's rim. Tomorrow, I'd mark the field and avoid that patch until technicians arrive. For now, the soil would keep its silent secret, and I'd keep checking for tracks that never appeared. I tracked the spot where it vanished, hearing the generator's fuel-laden cough. Suddenly, the light was gone. Checking the logging software revealed a 6-second power draw dip. Dish motor readouts flickered briefly before stabilizing. No external interference showed up. No grid spikes, no radar returns on base scanners. Pulling on a jacket, I walked to the fence and scanned the empty horizon. Just scrub pines and the ranch road cutting through the landscape. For the next hour, I paced between dishes, listening for any hint of rotor wash or engine hum. My phone was useless out here. No cell, no internet to check aircraft notices. I radioed the on-duty astronomer on the hilltop station, but only static answered. Back in the shack, I scribbled anomaly at 11:03 in the log and returned to watching for cosmic rays. Grey morning light crept in, and by 6:30 the maintenance crew's truck engines rolled up the hill. At the gate, 2 men in black suits stood by the guardhouse, crisp, starched shirts, no badges, no hats. They didn't even glance my way. I swiped my ID twice, confirming its validity. "Morning, Dan," I called to Clyde. They turned in perfect sync. The taller one stated, "Marcus Hall," his tone flat and emotionless. He handed me a manila folder. "Review this." The other man remained silent, hands clasped, tie impeccable, shoe spotless. Fragments of their low conversation drifted, shift log, omit, discuss offline. Inside the folder, a printout of my entry bore a classified checkmark. Block font instructions screamed, "Do not discuss incident with anyone. Authority-level blackside access required." "That was last night's anomaly," the shorter man said. "He saw nothing. Do you understand?" I swallowed hard, but I saw the light. It moved. It passed behind the mesa. The taller man stepped forward, his polite yet cold expression unchanging. No such movement registered on our sensor arrays. No power fluctuation. No radio interference. "You reported a spurious signal. That's all." I stood at the metal gate, the folder heavy in my hand. The morning breeze made the latch swing. My stomach ached as I watched the falcon wheel above the antenna array, sharp eyes hunting field mice in the pale blue sky. Just moments ago, he had spoken with a neutral final tone. "You're cleared for standard duty, but you will not log or speak of the incident again." The folder snapped shut. He handed it back, then turned and walked down the hill with the other man, their footsteps crunching in unison until the scrub pines swallowed them. Back in the control shack, I tore out the log page with the anomaly entry and tossed it in the burn barrel behind the generator shed. Smoke curled toward the dishes in the wind. At lunch, I scanned the shift logs. No entry for 11th, no note of power dip, no mention of radio glitch. It was like I'd never written it. My hands shook as I sipped coffee from the break room pot. I stared out the window, waiting for that amber light to drift back. Into view, the dish motors hummed through calibrations. The astronomer called for clear data. I punched the keys, and the sensors checked out. No anomalies. I watched the sunset through the east window, orange and red, behind the antenna. Later, I stopped at the junction above the mesa. Its rim cut a clean line against the sky. I sat in the car, headlights off, radio silent. Nothing but pinyon and juniper scents surrounded me. Driving down the gravel road, I felt eyes on me from the ridge. I glanced up empty. Town lights appeared as small dots in the darkness. At home, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote, September 12th, 11:03 p.m. observed slow-moving amber light dip below Mesa. Power generator hiccup. Sensor panel reset. Radio silence. No radar returns. Folder labeled classified. Instructed to omit. I read it twice, closed the book, and locked it in my drawer. Outside, the night settled without a sound. In bed, I listened to the trailer's metal roof creak under a high wind. When I closed my eyes, I saw that light again, a steady glow descending over bare rock, disappearing like someone had lowered a lamp behind a curtain. Two men in black suits, faces unreadable, telling me what I could and couldn't see. Just after 5 in the afternoon, I lifted off from Pine Valley Airstrip. The southern Oregon sky blazed with sunlight as I settled into my rented Cessna 172. My goal was simple: circle over the Rogue River Canyon, snap some landscape shots, and return before sunset. Climbing to 3,500 feet, I noticed the wind picking up from the west. Radio chatter mentioned a small brush fire near Dry Creek Road, contained but with a visible smoke plume. Curiosity got the better of me, and I veered east to take a closer look. By 5:25, I was hovering above the fire scene. The ground below was a stark canvas of red-orange flames and charred earth. Heat rose against the plains bee, creating a subtle shudder, reminiscent of driving over rough terrain. As I prepared to photograph the scene, something unusual caught my eye. Above the smoke, 6 glowing orbs hung silently, positioned about 100 feet above the tree line. Initially pale, almost white, they revealed a soft amber core when I zoomed in. Arranged in a loose V shape, each orb spaced roughly 30 feet apart, they moved in perfect unison with the breeze. No propeller wash, no strobe flickering, just a gentle, synchronized drift. The world around me seemed to fade. Radio chatter became distant, engine noise muted. I cracked the window, straining to hear anything beyond the propeller's hum and rushing wind. Something made me hesitate to report the phenomenon, an inexplicable feeling that held me back. For 2 minutes I watched. Then, as if on cue, the orbs began to disperse, drifting apart and seeming to melt into the surrounding woods. I managed to capture a few grainy photographs before banking north to escape the thermal updraft. By 5:40, I was clear of the smoke, heading back to Pine Valley. My camera's memory card was filled with fireline images and those mysterious orb shots. My heart raced, though I tried to rationalize the experience as some kind of fire district balloon experiment for monitoring air currents. I radioed the tower and received clearance to land, the strange encounter still burning in my mind. I landed on runway 21, the strip bare, except for a fuel truck humming near the hangar. Cutting the engine, I stepped out into the cool late afternoon air. 2 mechanics waved, but I just nodded and headed for the pilot's lounge to download my photos. That's when he appeared, tall, lean, in a black suit that seemed out of place on the dusty tarmac. No pilot's wings, no name tag, just dark glasses and a slim black tie. His approach was measured, hands clasped behind his B. I thought he might be from the fire district. Captain Lewis, he said, voice smooth. We shook hands, his grip firm and dry. I confirmed my name and asked if he was with the fire department. Just a concerned observer, he replied. Then he got straight to the point. You saw those orbs over Dry Creek, correct? My stomach tightened. Yes, I'd been circling the fire and gotten some shots. He nodded slowly. You've seen too much, he said. File that sighting as a weather balloon release. The county does occasional upper air launches near Prospect. He pronounced prospect like it was a secret code. I frowned. Weather balloons at night? 6 of them drifting low over a forest fire. He offered just a hint of a smile. Routine, he said. No need to report anything unusual. A plain white card appeared in his hand, stamped with the airstrip logo and phone number. Call this line tomorrow, he instructed. Say balloon release confirmed. They'll know what you mean. I pocketed the card. He turned and walked away, moving with mechanical precision, like a music box suddenly wound up. No, goodbye. No hesitation. I watched him slide into a black SUV beside the hangar. The engine didn't roar, just a low growl. Then the vehicle dissolved into the parking lot's shadows. Standing there, I stared at the empty asphalt. Inside the lounge, I checked the photos. The orbs were in every frame, soft, perched above the smoke, then vanishing. I downloaded them to a flash drive and plugged in my camera. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee into the gutter. The next morning, I called the number. Just as he said, a generic weather balloon release confirmed at 5:20 p.m., Thank you, over and out. No name, no follow-up. 6 amber circles glowed in the gloom, perfectly still. I keep staring at these photos, hidden on a flash drive tucked away in my console. Weather bad. Loons, I tell myself, if I repeat it enough, maybe I'll start believing. Night shifts at Green's 24-hour mini-mart have their own rhythm. This particular night felt different from the start. At 11:02 p.m., the door chime rang, but when I looked up, nothing. Just empty double doors and the dull hum of the neon sign. Outside, a black sedan sat under the lone street lamp, headlights off, engine so quiet I barely heard it over the air conditioner, broad-shouldered, polished like glass. I folded my arms and pretended not to notice. By midnight, I'd served 12 customers, mostly kids grabbing Red Bulls and one guy buying dog biscuits. At 3 a.m. the sedan never moved. I counted cigarette sales, 35, refilled snack racks, gazed out the window. No movement except the single overhead bulb, ticking like a slow clock. Something felt off. Even Scout, the store cat, huddled behind the chips, tail wrapped tight around her paws. At 1:17 a.m., the soda cooler buzzed and flickered. A small power surge dimmed the fluorescent lights, but the coffee machine kept running. Probably just the store's wiring. I reset the breaker in the back room, flipping the switch for aisle 3. Then, at 2:45, a cold, clear drip started near the back door. Water forming a small puddle on the concrete floor, I grabbed the mop and bucket, tracking down the source of the leak. Those 6 amber circles. Always watching, always wondering what they were tracking. I panned the security cameras, trying to get a better view of the parking lot, but the feed kept cutting to static. By the time it cleared, only the front of the black sedan remained frozen in pixelated grey. Earlier, the drip from the air duct had caught my attention. After inspecting it, I found no condensation or dropped pipe. The drip slowed and then stopped completely. The store was quiet. Scout, the cat, rubbed against my leg after emerging from under the counter. I checked the restrooms. Everything was dry. The musty smell of wet carpet hung in the air. At 3:30, the bug zapper over the door sizzled twice, sending a chill through the store despite the cool AC. Then I saw it. The sedan rolled forward 3 feet with no driver visible. The passenger door opened and closed on its own, as if guided by invisible tracks. I walked to the front, shining my flashlight. No movement, no one inside, the engine off. A young woman came in later buying trail mix. She glanced at me, then the lot, asking, "Is something out there?" I brushed it off. "Just an old car," I said. She nodded and left. By 5:30, things got stranger. My lunch, a turkey and cheese sandwich, had vanished from the refrigerator. No trace, no note, just an empty plastic wrapper. I hadn't heard anyone come in. My shift wound down. 2 more customers bought lottery tickets and beef jerky. At 6:02 a.m., I hit the door chime and grabbed my jacket. Walking out to the lot, I expected to see the sedan, but the parking space was empty, as if it had never been there at all. The evening was warm, clinging to my skin even after I'd killed the engine. Late July, around 8 o'clock, and I was alone in my Toyota, with windows down. A can of cheap iced tea sweated in the cup holder, while the radio wavered between stations, static dancing with the whine of tires on asphalt. Highway 89 had been a crawl all day, so I'd taken the gravel cut-off to stretch my legs before the long drive home. The road wound past the radar station, those big white domes you see in secret base photos, though it was mostly just abandoned admin buildings and a lone guard shack. Nobody ever seemed to be around. As I slowed for a sharp corner, my headlights swept the hillside and caught something. A flash of silver, thin and elongated like a metal shard skimming across the sky. It darted east to west faster than any jet. No roar, no contrail, just a streak of movement. I rounded the last bend just as the sun slipped below the jagged horizon. Earlier that day, the property had been empty. No car, no footprints in the gravel, no oil spots. I'd checked the side door exit locked with no signs of tampering. My phone buzzed. A text from the manager, "Leave the key under the mat, maintenance at 10 o'clock. I hadn't mentioned anything about the fridge or the car. I simply replied, "Got it." Walking to my car, keys in hand, I stopped. A black SUV idled in front of the convenience store. Across the road, a man in a black suit sat in the driver's seat, jacket buttoned, tie narrow, hands flat on the wheel. He stared at me, unblinking. My pulse spiked. I raised a hand in greeting. He opened his door and stepped onto the street without a sound. I walked closer, keeping my jacket zipped. The morning was cool, "You won't remember this conversation," he said, his voice low but clear. He reached into his jacket pocket and pressed a small card into my palm. White edges, blank with a single line of type in the corner. "Do not recall." I blinked. He stepped back, got into the SUV, and drove away without headlights, tires rolling silent on asphalt. I stood holding the card. When I looked down, the text was gone, my hand was empty. I glanced across the road. The store's doors were closed, lights still on inside. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. A quick streak of molten metal sliced through the twilight. My car fishtailed in the loose gravel as I slammed on the brakes. Stepping out, the heat enveloped me first, then an eerie silence. I set my iced tea on the roof and wiped sweat from my neck, scanning the darkening sky. A single star hung over the radar dome. With my phone's flashlight cutting through the night, I illuminated the high. Trees stood motionless, the dome round and lifeless in my headlights. Just as I was about to dismiss what I'd seen, a sound broke the silence. Crunching gravel. I whirled around to find a massive black SUV blocking the road, its engine idling, windows up, no lights on. I didn't recall hearing it approach. A man emerged from the passenger side, tall and lean, with dark hair slicked back. He wore a crisp black suit and narrow tie. No badge, no identification. His hands remained in his pockets, and he didn't use a flashlight. He simply stood, watching me with an unreadable, calm expression. "Did you see something up there?" I asked, pointing to the sky. His response was measured. "You shouldn't be here. This road doesn't go anywhere. Keep driving." I frowned. "There's nothing past that dome except a dead end and a drop-off to the river. What road goes somewhere?" He took a step forward. "None that matters. Move along." My gaze drifted past him to the thick woods and steep slope. "I saw a silver object up there," I insisted. He shook his head, eyes locked on mine. Then, as if responding to an unseen presence, he repeated, "Just drive." Something tight gripped my chest. The hill revealed nothing, no object, no glare, no movement, just the white dome and tree line. He stood half in shadow, half in the SUV's faint glow. A hint of a smile almost crossed his face, but never reached his eyes. "Am I in the wrong place?" My voice was small, echoing on the empty road. He nodded slowly, deliberately, and slipped a folded card into my hand. "Why 89 North? No detours." I pulled my car forward, trembling hands gripping the wheel, with the SUV riding tight behind me. Just moments ago, a man had handed me a flashlight with white casing and text reading, "Keep moving, no stops, watch the sky." He was already back in his vehicle, engine running. My mind raced with thoughts of resistance, taking a photo, calling someone. But my shaking fingers couldn't even find my phone. At the T intersection, I turned north onto the main road. Every glance in the rearview mirror showed the SUV maintaining its position, those dark lenses fixed ahead. About half a mile down, I hit smooth pavement and pressed the accelerator. Suddenly, the SUV vanished. No fading headlights, no mirror reflection, simply gone. I continued north, highway lights breaking through pine shadows, the night air shifting. An old country song crackled on the radio. I pulled into the next gas station, heart pounding. Checking the back seat revealed nothing. No card, no trace of my mysterious passenger. The passenger door was closed, seatbelt untouched. I filled the tank, bought a soda, and cautiously checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages beyond a low battery warning. No photos, no GPS record of our encounter. The weather app showed clear skies, no moon visible until after midnight. The drive home was silent, my mind churning. Silver dart, empty hillside, black SUV, the cryptic card's message, "Watch the sky." Every headlight beam through the trees made me flinch. Parking in the garage, I sat in darkness for a long moment. I cracked the card between my fingers. Smooth paper, cool ink. On the kitchen counter under the overhead light, I set it down and made coffee. Through the window, the driveway's asphalt split between shadow and yellow light. The ridge's sky looked vacant. Leaning against the glass, I listened intently for any sign of return. Engines, footsteps, anything. Only the refrigerator's hum and a distant dog's bark broke the silence. I don't take that route anymore. Not if I can help it. The longer road winds through more forest, bumping along miles of trees. My eyes drift to the sky, watching for that silver flash. That Sed's shriek of fear. When I close my eyes, I hear gravel shifting behind me. Just for a moment, like someone emerging from darkness, telling me to keep driving. It happened on a calm May morning around 6 a.m. The sea was glassy, no wind. I'd anchored the boat near an old jetty about a quarter-mile from shore, hoping to catch some halibut. Sunglasses raised, I leaned over the side and saw it, a perfect disc, maybe 2 feet across, hovering 10 feet below the surface. The disc gleamed like nickel, its edges blurred as if seen through water. My fishing rod rattled in its holder. I grabbed the camera, switched to dive mode, and took a shot through the green-blue blur. The disc remained motionless, no fish, no bubbles, no visible support. My heart raced as I leaned closer, breathing through my ragged hoodie's tube. Then it vanished. No ripples, no sound, just water. I sculled back to shore, fishing forgotten. At home, I downloaded the photo. On screen, a pale, grainy circle emerged, barely visible against the underwater sea. Seaweed drifted. Sun rays cracked through the water. I stared until my coffee went cold. That afternoon, I told my neighbor Jules, a marine biologist. She suggested it might be a sunken buoy or diving gear. We walked the jetty at dusk, but the water was dark. Only street lamp reflections danced on the surface. For days, I watched from my porch. The bay consumed my thoughts. Metal shapes drifted through my dreams. I'd wake suddenly, convinced something scraped the boat's hull. On the third morning, 2 men arrived around 8:15. I stood there in my bathrobe, coffee mug, clutched tight. 2 men stood on my porch, both dressed entirely in black. The taller one wore a fedora and shiny shoes without a tie. His companion was shorter, stocky, in a baseball cap and jacket. Their pale faces watched me intently as I asked, "Can I help you?" The tall man spoke. He first, his voice low and polite. "Mr. Kendricks." When I nodded, he accepted a manila folder from his partner. Inside were blurry photographs, pale discs under dark water. I recognized them immediately. The same shapes I'd captured earlier, only now they looked smudged as if brushed over. "These are from your camera," he stated. I felt a rush of heat. Yes, that was mine. Without emotion, he explained these were misfire errors. Equipment glare, water droplets on the lens. His message was clear: remove the images and say nothing more. My coffee mug shook in my hand as I set it on the porch railing. "Why?" I asked. "No reason to make this public," he responded carefully. "Best kept in private records." When I asked if he wanted me to delete the photos, he nodded. "Delete them. It will weigh less on your conscience." The stocky man leaned forward. "Forget what you saw," he said softly but firmly. Their faces were partially obscured. The tall man's fedora casting a perfect shadow, the shorter man's cap hiding half his brow. Neither blinked. They returned the folder, walked to a matte black truck with no markings, and drove away without headlights. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might wake the neighborhood. Inside, I locked the door and turned on every light. I found the disk photo on my laptop, dragged it to the trash, and hesitated before hitting delete. The trash was emptied. Later that day, I returned to the jetty. Same spot, same light, same calm water. Nothing shimmered beneath, just seagrass, flat surfaces, and lazy cloud shadows. I lowered my camera, closed my eyes, breathed in the salt air, and tried to forget. I rolled up to the corner of 5th and Madison just after midnight, my cab idling under the streetlight. Rain from earlier had slicked the pavement, and steam curled off manhole covers. My name's Derek Chavez, and I drive for East Side Taxis. This was supposed to be my last shift before the weekend. A black sedan pulled in behind me, and 2 men in dark suits climbed into the back seat without a word. They shut the door so quietly I hardly heard the click. Glancing in the rear view, I saw 2 men in white shirts, skinny black ties, polished shoes and sunglasses, even in the wet dark. One was tall and lean, the other shorter and square-shouldered. Neither gave me a destination. I tapped the meter and asked, "Where to, gentlemen?" The tall one leaned forward, his voice calm with no accent I could place. "No destination," he said. "Just drive." I nodded and pulled away, taking Madison north toward the freeway. After a minute, I checked the fare display. $420 and climbing. In the rear view, 2 dark shapes sat motionless. No expression, no phone. I asked about a roundabout on Maple. The short one turned slightly, saying, "Circle the city. Follow directions." He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small slip of paper, water-spotted from the cab's humidity. I folded it into the console, unable to make out letters in the low light. The tall one cleared his throat, tapping the back of my seat. His jacket shifted, revealing a silver clip. Now I can't shake the urge to check the horizon for a glint of metal. I haven't told anyone, not my wife, not even the fishing forum. I keep replaying how these men looked at me as if cataloguing what I could remember. Maybe they're right, maybe it was just a camera glitch or a trick of water. But late at night, I dream of that perfect circle hovering in the sea. I wake up reaching for photos I've trashed. My windows stay shut tight now, and I drive past the old jetty without slowing down. The bay looks normal, empty, like nothing ever happened. I wonder, did I imagine it all? Or does something down there wait for me to look again? I drifted through the city following 3 simple arrows on a slip of paper. Left, right, left. No street names guided me. Quiet neighborhoods, neon signs, and shuttered storefronts blurred past as the meter climbed. $50, then $70. My head throbbed. Glancing at my watch, I saw 2:15 a.m., much later than the 12:30 I'd thought. Rough ride, I muttered. The 2 men beside me remained silent, the short one's only instruction: keep driving. I tried the radio, finding only static. The city channel offered nothing but hiss. Cell service was spotty, so I cracked the window, listening for any sounds of life. Just a distant hum and the occasional passing car. I felt utterly alone. At 307, I turned onto a one-way street, crossing the river into the industrial district. Orange street lamps flickered weakly. Another arrow pointed back downtown. I pressed the gas, the city skyline sliding by, neon reflecting on wet asphalt. By 4 a.m., I was near the old freight yard. Rusty rails and dark warehouses surrounded me. I circled a block, lined with chain-link fences. The meter now read $142.50. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Questions burned in my mind, but the heavy air in the cab seemed to press against my chest, silencing me. At 4:22, a lone street lamp revealed a crumpled slip of paper taped to a stop sign. The shorter man leaned forward, pointing silently. I slowed and stopped. Under the lamp, the paper read, "Exit here." Following an alley beneath a broken chain, past a shuttered auto shop, I emerged onto the bridge. When the arrow pointed straight ahead, I halted. The tall one opened the door and stepped out onto the slick sidewalk without a backward glance. The short one followed. I watched them walk into a bright yellow bus shelter and dissolve into the night. 30 seconds passed, my heart racing, and I stepped out, closing the door gently. The console e-slip was blank. No ink, no letters. The meter flashed, fair courtesy of Agent S, before resetting to 0. My head spinning, I locked the doors and sat sipping lukewarm coffee. 2 missed calls showed on my phone. From dispatch, 1 voicemail cutting through the silence. Hours of driving in endless circles, and a single request. Report in. I bit my lip and hit call back, connecting to an unknown number that rang with an eerie stillness. No ring, just a click. A low, calm female voice emerged, but she never mentioned last night's ride. I stuttered, "Who is this?" Silence answered, and then the line went dead. The rain started again, drumming on the cab roof as I sat in the empty vehicle. Eventually I got out, locked the doors, and walked under the bridge to the bus stop. My headlamp flickered to life, casting a weak glow on the yellow shelter that stood completely empty. No suits, no footprints disturbed the puddles. Home came at 5:03 a.m., and I entered quietly. The meter card in my pocket showed 0 charge, and my phone had erased the mysterious number from its call log. I put on the kettle and stared at the rain-smeared window until dawn broke. 2 hours later, I left for my day job, locking the front door and ensuring no one followed. Dispatch heard nothing about this strange encounter. Who paid for the ride? Why the circular route? The slip of paper in my pocket remains blank, yet I carry it everywhere. Sometimes, when light catches it just right, faint arrow outlines seem to emerge. I usually tuck it back into my wallet and keep walking, hoping that call never comes again. At sunrise, driving the crew truck down County Road 42 toward the site north of Willow Creek, the headlights revealed something unusual. A dark circle, almost perfectly round and about 2 feet across, sat centered in the right lane. The surrounding pavement looked normal, but S spot appeared, baked as if a blowtorch had been held against it until the surface bubbled. No cracks, just a hard-edged charcoal-like patch. I parked between the cones, grabbed my hard hat and flashlight, and crossed the road. A strange smell hung in the air, burning rubber mixed with ozone. Crouching, I shined the light across the circle. It was smooth, almost glassy, reflecting my flashlight beam. My gloved finger traced the sharp, unchipped edge. Tapping the center produced a hollow sound, like striking a lid. A shiver ran through me, wondering what could have created such a mark. I clipped my radio mic, bass to crew. "Come in, I've got something odd on County 42, mile 5.7. Silence answered. Everyone was out, marking potholes on Route 99. I picked up a rock and flicked it against the circle's edge, waiting. I was on my route at 6:12 a.m. when I spotted it, a perfect black ring sitting on the pavement. The sun was just peeking over the cottonwoods, casting an orange glow across empty farmland. Corn stalks swayed gently in the breeze. I dropped my phone while trying to snap a photo. The autofocus struggled, leaving a grainy image of the mysterious mark. Something felt off. I called dispatch, but they said crews wouldn't arrive for another hour. So I drove to the Ibis diner for coffee. Maria, the waitress, listened as I described the mark. Her brother had seen something similar the night before, a blue glow in a crop circle near Tiller's Mill that faded quickly. Different shapes, but the same unsettling precision. By 7:30, Ahmed and Lena arrived with shovels and metal detectors. We methodically investigated the site. Ahmed swept his detector over the ring. No beeps. Lena carefully scraped the edge with a trowel, but found nothing. We dug a foot down into solid earth. No hidden devices, no explanation. I marked the site's corners with alternating red and yellow. Our spray paint. Around 8:45, I took a break, standing beneath a power pole and smoking. A lone helicopter swept back and forth across the county line, its distant rotor noise the only sound. I tried radioing base about the aerial reconnaissance. No response. Mid-morning brought a county representative. Sharp suit, grey hair, sunglasses cutting through the overcast. He pulled up in a black sedan, engine silent. When I approached, he showed a badge. C. Langford, Special Investigator, no logo. "You found the pavement mark?" he asked. I explained how we'd investigated thoroughly but discovered nothing. He nodded, simply saying, "Interesting." The circle remained perfectly etched into the asphalt, defying explanation. He tapped the notebook and pulled a booklet from his jacket. "Radiation heat anomalies?" I shook my head. Thermal camera showed nothing unusual. No gear response, just looked burned. Smelled weird. No tracks. He squatted, running a gloved hand carefully over the grand surface, avoiding the center. Standing up, he snapped the notebook shut. "We'll keep this off the record," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "No reports, no photos, beyond initial intake. You want me to delete the pictures?" He tapped his sunglasses. "Just hold them. If anyone asks, you never found anything, etched it, and moved on." I resisted. "County policy requires logging safety hazards." "This isn't policy," he retorted. "It's an order." He paused. "You'll understand later." Pulling a card from his coat, he slid it across the hood. "Here's my contact. Any questions about District 7 anomalies, you refer them to me, a phone number, and name. C. Langford. No agency, no title, no logo." I tucked the card in my jacket pocket. He nodded, climbed into the black sedan, and drove away without a backward glance. Crickets chirped in the grass. Distant highway engines hummed. Lena and Ahmed watched. From the cab, concerned, I waved them over. "Cover the hole with cold mix. Smooth it out." No mention of the circle. Ahmed hesitated, but company policy was clear. If the boss says cover it, you cover it. We applied black asphalt, blending the mark with the pavement, 2 passes with the roller, then packed up. Driving home, the county card felt heavy in my pocket. Outside Ibis, the helicopter reappeared. Same pattern. Rotor blades sliced the grey sky into shadows. A chill ran down my spine. Home by noon. Rain dripped from my jacket, keys on the table, work boots off, shower running. The bathroom mirror reflected my exhaustion. Dark circles, pale skin, dried, dressed. The card lay before me. C. Langford, Special Investigator. So special, no one else knows him. My finger hovered over the phone. I poured a drink. The rain tapped against the window, matching my heartbeat. My coffee sat black and cold beside a half-eaten sausage biscuit. A car pulled into the drive, and Miss Carter knocked. "Soaked through?" she asked about the highway crew. I mentioned a routine patch, forcing a laugh when she described her son's story about strange dawn lights like glowing cracks. She smiled and left. I closed the door, pulse racing. My eyes traced the dark rectangle of cold mix in the driveway. Running my hand over the repair sheet, I set a manila card beside it. Rain drummed outside, casting flickering neon shapes across the wet windowsill. I nursed the cooling coffee, staring at the card. Langford remained uncalled, the photos undeleted. The pavement seemed to watch me as I sat listening to the rain. That summer at Cedar Hollow State Park was typically quiet. Days filled with hikers and families, nights belonged to me and the wildlife. Thick with pine and oak, the park held its secrets. The north end, past the old fire road, was a section I routinely checked. One afternoon near July's end, I was driving my ATV on a slow patrol when something caught my eye. A perfect circular clearing stood out unnaturally in the forest. I knew clearings, and this wasn't natural. 40 feet across, every tree inside was dead, brittle and grey, as if scorched, yet without burn marks. The grass inside yellowed and dried, seemingly lifeless. Surrounding trees remained healthy and green, untouched by whatever had affected this spot. I parked nearby and approached. The air felt heavy, almost sticky. Crouching, I prodded the dead grass with a stick. It snapped easily, releasing a faint chemical odor. As the day wound down, I was making my way back to the ranger station after spotting an unusual dead patch in the forest. The late afternoon sky was heavy with clouds, and a few raindrops had started to fall. Something about the area I'd discovered just didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was off. I tried calling the main office on my radio to report my findings, but mid-explanation, the radio suddenly went dead, with a strange buzzing crackle. I checked the battery and antenna, and everything seemed normal, yet no signal came through. I chalked it up to interference from the trees, and decided to log the information back at the station. That evening after dinner, I sat by the window overlooking the fire road. The rain had stopped, but low, dense clouds hung in the sky. Just after 9 p.m., I noticed headlights approaching. 2 cars passed by, but one slowed and pulled off near the dead tree patch I'd discovered earlier. Grabbing my binoculars, I watched 2 men step out of a dark sedan. They were dressed identically in black suits, neat and unwrinkled, despite the wet weather. No ring gear, no official equipment. They simply stood at the edge of the woods, facing the dead patch with an unsettling still. These weren't typical forestry or park service workers. No badges, no radios, just an eerie presence that made me uneasy. I wanted to call out and ask what they were doing, but my radio was still inexplicably dead. For about 20 minutes, they remained motionless, seemingly focused on the dead patch. As quietly as they arrived, they got back into their car. They never once looked toward the station or acknowledged my presence. The car backed slowly down the road and vanished into the darkness. I waited, half expecting them to return, but the road remained empty for the rest of the night. The next day, I returned to the patch, hoping for some change or missed detail. Nothing had altered. The circular area of dead trees remained exactly the same. No new tracks, no signs of disturbance. I carefully examined the soil, but found no concrete evidence. No burns, no identifiable chemicals. Just a perfectly contained area of dead trees. When I mentioned the mysterious men to my supervisor, he dismissed my concerns without a second thought. Months have passed, and those dead trees remain unchanged, forming a mysterious circle that defies explanation. I can't make sense of what I witnessed or understand the purpose of those men. It's as if the forest held onto a secret, known only to them. Something strange happened that night, maybe a government operation or a weather anomaly. I didn't dig deeper. The radio came back to life the next morning, but I stayed alert for potential men in black. They never returned. Yet, every time I drove past that area after dark, an unsettling feeling crept over me. Something seemed to be waiting just beyond the tree line, silent and watchful. I'm Mayor Jensen, a freelance aerospace journalist who spent 2 years tracking missile launches. That morning at the White Sands test range, everything started with a rumble before dawn. Overcast. T-skies hung low, tinting the rising sun a muted grey. I'd arrived the night before, camping in my car near the observation bunker, ready for the scheduled test. At precisely 6:02 a.m., the alert horn blared. I lifted my DSLR and framed the launch pad through the bunker's narrow window. A bright flash erupted, and the missile's contrail sliced through the clouds like a white ribbon. Jet noise swelled from a deep roar to a distant whine as it climbed out of sight. I captured a dozen shots, lowering my camera only when the sound dissipated. That's when I spotted it. A solitary figure backlit by floodlights near the service road. Standing motionless by the chain-link fence, the person was poised with squared shoulders and a slightly bowed head. No safety gear, just a dark suit stark against the grey morning. I zoomed in with my lens. The figure remained perfectly still. Ducking under the window, I rushed outside with my camera. By the time I reached the fence, the test crew had retreated to their vehicles, leaving only gravel and scattered parachute hardware. The figure that should have been there had vanished. I circled the perimeter, peering through glare tape and searching every shadowy corner. Nothing. No footprints, no crushed grass, no evidence anyone had been there. My heart racing, I radioed range control. "This is Jensen. Do you have an observer at the south fence?" Silence. Just as I started walking back to the bunker, a soft click behind me made me spin around. Under the flood lamp, a man stood watching. In a black suit. White shirt, narrow black tie, shoes gleaming hard against the gravel. He stood impossibly straight, like someone had deliberately positioned every line of his body. I couldn't move. My feet seemed welded to the ground. A small wave, and then he spoke. "Ma'am." Calm, clipped. "This area is off limits." I held up my press badge. "Now, nose tech weekly. I have permission for photos." He shook his head. "Permission revoked." Another step closer. "Please return to the bunker." His face held no real expression, not unfriendly, just precise. I glanced at the bunker's clock. 6:15. 10 minutes of searching for something felt like hours. "Sir?" I asked. "I saw someone earlier. Dark suit, standing at the fence. Did you see them?" "No," response. He checked his watch. "Step away from the fence." I raised the camera. "Can I get a quote about why I'm being escorted?" Recording. He smiled. Just a faint mouth movement, and shook his head. "No area is secured." A sigh escaped him, like this task disgusted him. "Will you comply?" My fingers hovered near the shutter. Something made the hair on my arms rise. I stepped back, lowering the camera. He nodded, turned, and glided, not walked, into shadows behind the service road, completely silent. By 7 a.m., I'd driven to the main gate. The security guard looked bewildered. I flashed my pass. "Range closure," he said. "You must have missed the memo." I insisted there was no memo. He just shrugged, punched the gate code. "You shouldn't have been here." Back on the highway, I reviewed the photos. Missile blasts looked fine, bright arcs cutting through cloud cover. But along the fence line, something strange. A dark blur, a shape like a standing figure, then vanished. I zoomed in. The blur had fabric-like edges, but no real detail. Then gone in the next frame. At 8:15, I called my editor. Trying to describe the man in black, my voice broke. She mentioned the range's tight security for hypersonic tests, explaining they'd scrub sensitive photos, but something felt off. Something had happened out there. I was working the graveyard shift at the Green Ridge gas station, one of those little places just off Highway 89 that nobody really stops at unless they're pars. Sing through or desperate. The night had been slow, with cars trickling in and out every now and then, mostly truckers or folks heading home from late shifts. The fluorescent lights buzzed just loud enough to remind me I was the only one awake. Around 12:45, a beat-up silver sedan rolled up to pump 3. The driver's window was down, and the inside light clicked on when the driver popped it open. I was stacking energy drinks by the cooler and glanced up just as the car door shut. In the sedan's rearview mirror, I saw something odd. A dark, round shape hovering low over the far side of the parking lot near the trees. It was about the size of a small car, but the edges were fuzzy, like it was shimmering or out of focus. No noise, no lights, just this weird, flat disc shape floating a foot above the ground. I blinked and looked back. The car was still there, engine idling, but the driver's seat was empty. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe the driver stepped out for a smoke. "Hey, you okay?" I called out. Nothing, no answer. I walked around to the passenger side and looked inside. No one. The door was locked. Later, I found myself at a diner half a mile off base, spooning coffee. My camera bag rested on the seat beside me. I stared at the windows, half expecting to see a figure in black standing there, but saw only highway and scrub pines. A waitress approached, and I left my card before walking to my car. In the passenger seat lay a sealed manila envelope, stamped 612 with no return address. Inside were 2 prints of my photos cropped close to the fence line and a single slip of paper. No further inquiry. I folded it, tucked it back in the glove box, and drove home, feeling like I'd just woken from a half-remembered dream. The highway stretched on, yellow lines fading into dawn. I kept thinking I'd see that dark figure in my rear view. Perfect posture, black suey, tea, unblinking eyes. I didn't. I just kept driving until the city lights rose ahead. I circled the parking lot, scanning the trees and surroundings. Empty. The weird disc-like object had vanished, and when I double-checked the rearview mirror, the spot was completely clear. A hollow silence settled around me, making my skin prickle with unease. Returning inside, I locked the door and reached for the store phone to call the sheriff. Dead silence. I tried the radio next, but got the same result. Usually, even on quiet nights, I could manage a quick text, but now, nothing. When I glanced back outside, the sedan had disappeared without a trace. No headlights, no tail lights, just absence. About 10 minutes later, the door's bell chimed. A man stood before me, out of place in a dark suit and perfectly slicked back hair. His pale, expressionless face seemed lifted from an old black and white film, stark against the dusty gas station backdrop. "Good evening," he said in a flat, calm tone. "I'm sorry to bother you, I just have a couple of questions," he continued. His demeanor was unnervingly composed as he asked about recent strange occurrences, unusual lights, sounds, anything out of place. I hesitated, recounting the car that stopped earlier and the odd disc-like shape I'd glimpsed near the trees. He listened without a hint of surprise, simply nodding and asking if I'd taken any pictures. When I admitted I hadn't, being too confused, he pulled out a small notebook and jotted something down. "It's best you keep this to yourself," he advised. "People tend to misunderstand things they don't often see." When I frowned and mentioned the sheriff, he offered a faint, mirthless smile. "Exactly," he said, scanning the store before fixing his gaze back on me. "If anyone asks, you didn't see anything unusual tonight. Understand?" My gut churned with a desperate urge to call someone to escape, but the words caught in my throat. I mumbled a reluctant agreement. As he walked toward the door, he turned back with a final chilling reminder. "We're watching, but we don't want." I hit the trail at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sun beating down on the high desert outside Cedar Flats. My name's Alex Morales, and I'd come out to clear my head. No cell signal, just the old missile silo they decommissioned in the 70s, sitting halfway up the slope of Bald Mountain. The trail was dusty and overgrown, but I'd printed a topo map the night before, so I figured I'd find it easy enough. By 4:30, I'd topped out at the crater's rim. The silo hulked there, half-buried, concrete walls cracked and stained. I dropped my pack and walked around the perimeter, eyes wide for snakes. Instead, I saw patches of metal jutting from the rubble. Steel panels, rusted bolts, sections of corrugated plating. I pulled out my camera to snap pictures of the peeling chrome finish. That's when things got strange. I looked at one panel and saw not my camera's reflection, but a flash of movement behind me. Something bright, almost white, sliding across the metal like liquid. I spun around. Nothing. Just the sky and heat waves dancing over scrub brush. When I looked back at the panel, the glint was gone, replaced by dull rust. I crouched and shined my flashlight on the surface. Scratches covered the metal, dense but showing no new marks. My breath caught in my throat. The angle of the metal couldn't have caught the sun that way. I set the flashlight aside and circled the silo, peering into every recess. Between two wall segments, a narrow gap wide enough to squeeze into caught my eye. Later, back at work, I sat behind the counter for hours, heart pounding, eyes constantly checking the windows. The night felt too quiet. When the morning shift arrived, I handed over my keys without a word. I didn't want to sound crazy. For days afterward, I kept checking the parking lot. No strange cars, no hovering discs. But sometimes in the dark, I'd catch a flash of something in the rearview mirror near the tree line, always vanishing when I looked directly. I didn't tell anyone. It felt like one of those things you just don't discuss, especially after a man in a suit had told me to interfere unless necessary. The weird part is, I'm still not sure what I saw. Maybe it was a prank, but that didn't explain the empty car, the shape in the mirror, or the unnerving silence. Sometimes I wonder if they're still watching. I crawled into the dark, cramped space, my pack sliding in ahead of me. Dead cables hung like vines, murky water pulling at my feet. When I swept my light across the floor, blue reflections danced on the far wall, maybe 10 or 15 tiny pinpricks, as if someone had scattered flashlights behind the concrete ribs. But when I raised the beam higher, nothing remained. I swung my light left, then right. The reflections vanished. My heart raced as I sat up, feeling the cold walls against my skin. The entry hole was unnaturally smooth, almost polished. Shivering, I climbed back out through brush that tugged at my shirt. The sun was sinking lower now. I set up camp at the ridge's edge, tent, sleeping bag, stove, ramen boil, while I stared back at the silo. The metal glowed copper in the sunset, no shine or flash. I dismissed the strange lights as a trick of the evening and rolled into my sleeping bag. Midnight brought a low hum, different from any engine, more like air moving through a distant vent. Crickets chirped in the scrub as I sat up, pulse racing. I crawled out and scanned the starless sky. My headlamp revealed the silo's crater mouth, dark and silent, but the dome's vent cap glowed a faint green before winking out. I rubbed my eyes. Not ing. Sleepless until dawn, I imagined unseen eyes watching. By sunrise, I was hiking toward Elkridge Ranger Station, 6 miles below. My legs ached, but the strange reflections kept replaying in my mind. Dusty and parched, I reached the wooden desk where Ranger Connolly sat, a woman in her 60s with sun-weathered skin. I described my hike and casually asked if anyone else had reported odd lights near the silo. She studied me, then said no. Just then, the door chimed. A man in a crisp charcoal suit stood at the threshold. No ranger badge, just a pressed jacket and polished shoes, holding a white envelope. The sky was brightening with morning light, but I felt like noon would still be dusk. I headed down the dirt road, uncertain why I felt watched by every shadow in the trees. I reached my car, windows fogged with dust, and sat for a moment. Then I drove away, replaying the seams of the bunker, the ice blue flashes, the glow at midnight, and that suited man slipping an envelope through a locked door. Ranger Connolly was behind the counter when he approached, an envelope with red wax stamped with a single letter R. She lifted an eyebrow as he set it next to her clipboard. "Return to send her," he said, voice low and smooth. I believe this was misplaced. His eyes didn't look at me or her, just watched the envelope folded and waiting. "We don't have a mail drop here," she said. He straightened. "Then I'm the mailman. I trust you'll handle it accordingly." I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't leave anything here," I said, my voice small. For the first time, he turned toward me. His face was calm, almost blank, eyes dark behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Of course." He took a step back. "Good day." Then he walked out without another sound. Ranger Connolly stared after him, then tucked the envelope into a filing cabinet. "He's new," she said finally, as if she could still taste the formality. She waved at me. "Drive safe, Alex." I nodded and walked out, feeling the envelope's empty weight in my mind. I passed the turn-off to Bald Mountain without a look back, headlights on low beam, waiting for something to light the horizon again. It was a Sunday evening, end of July, and I was parked at the overlook above Seal Cove near Mendocino. The air still had some weight to it from the heat. I'd gone up there to catch the last of the light and maybe mess around with my binoculars. Not for anything serious, just something I do sometimes. I like the ocean at dusk. Everything feels quieter out there. The lot was mostly empty. One other car, some kind of camper van, parked further down, but no movement. I had a thermos of tea and my small binoculars. Nothing high-tech. I wasn't expecting to see anything unusual. It started with a shimmer, not flashing or moving, just a shimmer like heat rising off pavement, except it was hovering out over the water, low, maybe a couple degrees above the horizon. I noticed the shimmer out on the water, barely visible against the haze. At first, it seemed like a trick of light, or maybe a distant fishing boat. But when I focused, I realized it wasn't a normal light. It pulsed steadily, rhythmically, with a shape that kept folding and stretching like a dense bubble suspended in midair. For several minutes it remained completely still. The ocean beneath looked untouched. No waves, no current. It was as if that patch of water existed in its own separate reality. Something dark passed in front of it, stopping me in my tracks. Not a bird or plane, but a shapeless darkness with a sense of immense depth. It drifted across the shimmer and vanished just as quickly. I scanned the water for a boat or spotlight, but found nothing. My binoculars suddenly stopped working, but not mechanically. I could see the rail, engine and my hands clearly. But whenever I tried to focus on the shimmer, it blurred completely. When I looked with my bare eyes, the light was fainter, seeming to have moved further out. I sat there for about 10 more minutes. The light was fading, and that heavy silence before complete darkness had settled in. As I was putting the binoculars away, someone tapped on the window. I jumped. A man stood there, tall, pale, late 40s, wearing a black suit and clean white shirt. No tie. He'd appeared out of nowhere, no car, no footsteps. One moment I was alone, the next he was right beside me. I rolled down the window halfway. He leaned in slightly and spoke in a smooth but flat voice, like someone reading lines in an unfamiliar language. That part of the sky isn't public. When I asked what he meant, his expression remained unchanged. I used to drive out to Sunset Point after work, just west of San Luis Obispo. It's this quiet gravel turnout with an ocean view that's not even on most maps. Locals know about it though. That night was warm, with a hazy sky, and that strange glow you get after a hot day when the sun's already set. I had my dad's old Nikon binoculars in the glove box, something I always keep around. I'd just finished my sandwich and was leaning over the steering wheel, scanning the water. A tanker ship sat in the distance, and a few gulls flew low. Then, almost directly west, something shimmered on the horizon. At first it didn't move, just a small patch hovering a couple degrees above the water, like a heat mirage. Then this guy appeared next to my car. I could feel my hand shaking a little on the wheel as he spoke. "Please don't use optical devices in restricted airspace," he said, and just straightened up. I looked around, expecting to see a vehicle, but the lot was completely empty. The camper van from earlier had vanished without a trace. I glanced back and saw him walking away, not following the path down to the beach, but heading toward the bluff's edge. No flashlight, no hesitation. He just kept walking until he disappeared from view. I waited, though I'm not sure why. Part of me thought he might return or say something more, but the path remained silent. Eventually, I drove home without even turning on the radio. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the binoculars and tested them. They were fine, crystal clear. I pointed them at some street signs down the block, and everything came into focus perfectly. The next day, I returned to the same spot around the same time. Same ocean, same breeze, nothing in the sky. I stayed for about an hour, no shimmer, no man, no van. But then I noticed a new sign near the rail, a small metal plate bolted into the wood that read, "Sensitive Marine Surveillance Area. Do not loiter." I was certain it hadn't been there the night before. The ocean didn't feel right. The air had changed, losing its heat, and something hung there, a strange patch that shimmered and seemed to flex. Through my binoculars, I struggled to focus. The shape wasn't crisp. My eyes wanted to slide away from its edges. It bent slightly as I watched, almost cube-like, with a flickering top edge. No sound, no lights, just this bizarre distortion hanging in the air. The water beneath looked darker than its surroundings. I wiped my binocular lenses, looked again, and it remained. As the sun dropped completely, the shimmer held an odd internal glow, not bright, but just visible enough to confirm its presence. My phone was ready for a picture, but something stopped me. An inexplicable feeling suggested photographing it would alter something fundamental. Moments later, headlights appeared in my rear view. A black sedan pulled in swiftly with remarkable precision. No hesitation. It stopped just 5 feet behind my bumper. No interior lights were visible, and the windshield revealed nothing. Both front doors opened simultaneously. 2 men emerged, identically dressed in crisp white shirts, narrow black ties, with neat hair and blank expressions. They approached my window with practiced synchronization. The driver's side man tapped lightly, and when I rolled down the window, he spoke without emotion. "That part of the sky isn't public." Confused, I asked what he meant. He didn't respond. His partner stood watching the road, seemingly expecting something. From a thin manila folder, the first man briefly displayed a bold black label. Its contents a mystery. Their movements were calculated, their presence unnerving, as if this interaction was a routine they'd performed countless times before. I was working night patrol on Highway 24 near the Book Cliffs in eastern Utah. Most nights were dead quiet. Long runs between towns, barely any exits, just open desert and red rock. Early April was windy but clear. I'd been parked at a gravel pull-off around mile marker 219, killing time and watching for speeders, which was rare past midnight. Just after 2 a.m., I looked at the clock, thinking about grabbing a sandwich from the cooler. That's when I saw it. Something hovering near the northern ridge. Not flying like a plane or moving like a drone, just hanging there. A perfect black cube. Maybe the size of a small car. No lights, no reflection. It didn't wobble or rotate, just sat motionless about 40 or 50 feet above the ridgeline. Initially, I thought it might be a weird perspective thing. Maybe a tower or boulder catching strange light, but there was no moon, and the stars behind it had vanished. It blocked them completely. I got out of the cruiser and stood by the door. The wind was sharp, with only occasional gusts breaking the silence. I stared, trying to make sense of this thing. My first instinct was to call it in, but something made me hesitate. Later, I returned to the area. I found a man with a document. When I asked about what I'd seen, he simply said, "We'd like you to leave now." I nodded, started the ignition, and pulled out slowly. The sedan didn't follow me. I checked my mirrors for the next 10 miles. At home, I wrote down everything and sketched the mysterious shimmer. I tried researching military zones, weather balloons, optical illusions, but nothing matched. The next evening, I went back to the same spot, parking a bit further down. The sky was clear, the ocean normal. No shimmer this time, but a new sign was bolted to the railing. Plain metal, black print, unauthorized. Observation. No photography or optical equipment beyond this point. 2 days later, the sign had disappeared. I was on patrol, cruising along the ridgeline, when something caught my eye. A dark, tube-shaped object just hanging there, motionless. And it started moving, smoothly sliding sideways at maybe 5 or 6 miles an hour, maintaining a constant altitude. No lights, no sound, just this dark box gliding along the ridge. After covering about 100 yards, it stopped, seeming to observe something. I picked up the radio and reported an unknown aerial object near mile marker 219, possibly a drone. Dispatch offered to contact air support, but I told them to hold off. It wasn't technically breaking any laws, just existing. Back in the car, I kept watching through the windshield. For about 5 more minutes, nothing changed. Then it began ascending slowly, straight up, higher and higher until it vanished completely. No blinking lights, no trail, just gone. Suddenly, headlights appeared behind me. I hadn't heard an engine or seen anything in my mirrors. One moment the road was empty, the next, a black sedan idled just 10 feet from. My cruiser, no tags, no markings, windows completely blacked out. I stepped out, hand near my sidearm but not drawn, flashlight already on. I tried to shine it into the windshield, but the light reflected cleanly off the glass. Nothing visible inside. 2 men emerged, identical black suits, white shirts, black ties. Something was off about them. Their movements were too precise, too synchronized. One tall, around 6'2" inches, the other shorter and stockier. They looked more like mannequins than actual agents. Silently, the tall one approached and held out a manila folder. A red stamp in all caps read, "Natural Phenomena." The folder looked freshly printed. Without a word, he handed it to me and stepped back. Inside was a single sheet with numbered bullet points. First, object observed between 1 and 3 a.m. Second, do not engage or pursue. Third, no further documentation required. Fourth, no photographs. Fifth, do not discuss with media or outside agencies. A small box at the bottom labeled Initial Confirmed had a blank line next to it. The stockier man extended a pen. I didn't sign. I was working as a conductor for the Northwestern Rail Line, running the route that cuts through the Cascades. Most days were just routine, checking tickets, announcing stops, making sure everything ran on time. But one night in late October, just after 9 p.m., something happened on a stretch near Elk Ridge Station that I've never been able to explain. The sky was mostly clear, a bit chilly, but not freezing. The train was headed north through long, quiet stretches of forest and mountains, with only a few small towns breaking up the landscape. That's when I first saw the cube. When I asked them who they were, neither of the men answered. The tall one just looked at me, his voice even and devoid of emotion. "The object is not your concern," he said. Something about how he spoke mad. My stomach turned, like he had memorized the sentence perfectly, though English clearly wasn't his first language. I handed the folder back and requested identification. The tall one barely smiled, not out of amusement, but as if mimicking what he thought a smile should look like. The shorter man gazed past me toward the ridge and stated, "You didn't see where it went." When I responded that I didn't follow, he repeated the exact same phrase. They returned to their sedan, which rolled backward and executed a perfect 3-point turn. The car glided down the highway without headlights or engine noise, moving as if it knew the road better than I did. Back in my cruiser, I checked the dash cam. The recording showed nothing, no cube, no outline, no distortion, just clean sky. The sedan didn't appear on camera at all. You could see me getting out and talking, but no vehicle was visible behind me. I sat there for another hour, weighing whether to report the full story. Eventually, I logged it, simply as an unidentified aerial object with no interaction or pursuit. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, I've twice noticed the same sedan parked off the road near my shift change point. Same model, same dark glass, never moving, always disappearing when I return. I didn't sign any form, but they act like I did. The train rolled through a remote forest section, its tracks cutting through dense woods, with no roads or trails nearby. Tall, thick trees blocked any view beyond their shadows, creating an isolated landscape where strange occurrences could easily go unnoticed. The moon hung low and pale, casting elongated shadows over the dark tree line. I sat in the conductor's cabin near the front, sipping lukewarm coffee from my thermos. The train's steady rhythm made it easy to drift into a half-awake state. I'd traveled this route countless times before, never experiencing anything unusual. But that night was different. As we rounded a slight bend near milepost 42, a peculiar light caught my attention. A soft, ghostly beam swept slowly across the trees on the right side of the track. Unlike car headlights or a standard flashlight, this light moved with an eerie smoothness. It cut through the darkness with a muted glow that seemed to ignore the normal rules of illumination. I strained to understand its source. No sounds accompanied the light, just the train's consistent clatter. The beam continued its methodical scanning, moving in a deliberate arc. Near the clearing's edge, I caught a brief glimpse of a shadowy shape, something tall, not human. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks. Attempting to confirm what I was seeing, I tapped the radio to contact the dispatcher. Only static responded. The light beam eventually disappeared behind a ridge, but an unsettling sensation remained. Something was watching. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Elkridge Station. The platform was deserted, typical for this late hour. As I prepared for our quick stop, two men suddenly appeared at the far end. They wore identical black suits and ties, impeccably pressed despite the damp chill. No coats, no hats, just standing there, looking distinctly out of place. The train was eerily quiet when I noticed them. Two men stood motionless at the far end of the platform, completely out of place. They carried nothing, no bags, no backpacks. Most strange was how they seemed unbothered by the cold, just standing there silently before boarding the last car without tickets or interaction. Something felt off. I watched them carefully as they sat side by side near the back of the train car. Other passengers acted like they didn't exist, avoiding any acknowledgement. These men didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead with an unnerving stillness. At Firgrove, the next stop, I walked to the rear car to investigate, but when I arrived, they had vanished. No trace of them on the platform or in the station. I asked other passengers if they'd seen anyone leave, but they shrugged, claiming no memory of these men. A strange weight settled in my chest. I reported the incident to the station master, who gave me a cryptic look and quickly changed the subject. The rest of the trip continued normally, but those men lingered in my thoughts. In the following days, I sought answers. Other conductors knew nothing. Dispatch offered no explanation. Maintenance crews at Elkridge confirmed no nighttime work had occurred in weeks. The more I pondered their sudden appearance, the silent radio, and the strange light sweeping the forest, the more unsettling the entire encounter became. Later, I returned to Elkridge Station during daylight. Everything looked ordinary. No disturbances, no hidden cameras, no unusual equipment. Official logs showed no record of unauthorized boarding that night. Weeks passed, and I found myself unconsciously scanning the sky near Elkridge during each trip. No light beams, no mysterious men appeared, yet the memory remained, a puzzle with missing pieces. Up near Lawson in Northern California, I'd taken a few days off work and skipped my usual coastal trip. Late September, before the first real snow, but cold enough to see your breath. I found an old Forest Service site off a dirt road. No official markings, just a clearing big enough for my car and a two-person tent. I arrived around 4 in the afternoon while it was still light out. Setting up camp was straightforward. I started a small fire and cooked a simple dinner of instant rice and beans on my camp stove. The area was completely deserted. No tire tracks, no voices. Cell service vanished the moment I turned off the highway. By 9 p.m., darkness had fully settled. No moon, no ambient light. I spent some time by the fire, then retreated to my tent to read. My phone showed 9:42 p.m. in airplane mode. After reading a few chapters of a mystery novel, I switched everything off. I typically sleep lightly outdoors, but that night, I must have fallen into a deep slumber. Something jolted me awake. The entire tent glowed bright white, as if someone had flipped on a floodlight directly overhead. The illumination was complete, yet utterly silent, which struck me as deeply unnerving. Normally, you'd expect some accompanying sound, but there was nothing. Quickly sitting up, I checked my phone. 2:08 a.m. Cautiously, I unzipped the tent and peered out. The light source was above me, not on the ground. Leaning further out, I saw them. 5 or 6 small white lights rotating in a tight, precise circle about 40 or 50 feet above the trees. They were perfectly spaced, seemingly attached to something, though no connecting shape was visible. The lights turned slowly, silently. I crouched in the tent's opening, breath fogging in the cold, watching. My knees grew numb from the position. The lights continued their steady rotation, unchanging. Suddenly, they stopped. For about 2 seconds, they held perfectly still, then vanished. Not a fade, but an instant disappearance into complete darkness. In the conductor's cabin at night, I sometimes feel watched from the woods. The radio remains silent. The forest road was quiet when I broke camp at sunrise, skipping coffee and quickly packing up my gear. I didn't even take time to brew a pot, just folded the tent, tossed it in the car, and hit the road. Something from the night before was nagging at me, though I couldn't place what. I kept checking the rearview mirror during the drive, scanning for something. About 40 minutes later, I pulled into Mineral, a tiny road. Sedan I'd passed countless times but never entered. 2 booths, a counter with stools, and a worn linoleum floor greeted me. Only one other person was inside. A man sitting at the counter with his back turned. The waitress waved me in, so I slid into a window booth. As I ordered eggs and toast, the man at the counter stood and turned. He was striking, tall, pale, dressed in a razor-sharp black suit that seemed completely out of place. No jacket, just perfectly pressed black pants and a button-up shirt, immaculately tucked in. A wide-brimmed hat sat atop his head, dark and old-fashioned. Without warning, he walked over and sat across from me. No greeting, no permission asked. He just folded his hands on the table and stared. Then he spoke, his voice eerily controlled. "Did you sleep through it?" The way he said it felt off, like someone practicing human speech but not quite understanding its nuances. I stammered, "Excuse me." He repeated the question slower this time. Something in my chest tightened. I claimed I didn't understand, but deep down, a strange sense of unease was growing. He tilted his head, then looked out the window as if suddenly disinterested. The waitress returned with my food, sensing the tension. "Everything all right here?" she asked, breaking the strange silence. I was chasing storms in western Kansas, about 15 miles outside Scott City late last May. For 8 seasons now, I've been doing this mostly solo, though sometimes I team up with other chasers I run into on the plains. That day, I was alone. The sky was a textbook setup, dry line pushing east, plenty of sheer, cape values through the roof. It started flat and blue, but by late afternoon, it transformed into something alive. I'd been watching a cell build for an hour, parked on a dirt road with a wide view of the horizon. Around 5:40 p.m., the storm intensified. A classic sup. A cell with a big inflow tail, rotation tightening. I positioned myself east of the war cloud, about 2.5 miles out. Lightning was constant, but no rain yet, so visibility remained clear. I was filming from the truck's back, my main camera on a tripod and a GoPro on the dash. Running a time-lapse. At 6:12, the funnel dropped thin at first like a rope, but it widened quickly. It touched down in an open field, kicking up dirt immediately. I kept recording, repositioning to stay ahead, capturing a full 3 minutes of the tornado at its peak strength. During those 3 minutes, something inexplicable happened. The tornado was wrapping in rain, but I could still see its base. Suddenly, there was a flash bright, but not lightning coming from inside. Later, at a diner, I sat eating, barely tasting my food. A man sat nearby, mouth open as if about to speak. Then he stood and walked out without a word. No coffee, no food, just left. I asked the waitress if she knew him, but she hadn't seen him come in. When I got outside, his vehicle was gone. Only my car and a rusty pickup truck remained. On the drive home, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe I dozed off. Maybe it was just a dream. But when I got home and checked my phone, I found something unsettling. In the Notes app, a new entry appeared at 2:17 a.m. when I was supposedly in my sleeping bag. Just a string of numbers typed out in sets of 3 like coordinates. No title, no formatting. I haven't looked them up. I don't want to know where they point. I was storm chasing near Oakley when something strange caught my eye during a tornado. A metallic object, disc-shaped, moved against the wind's rotation for just a moment. It appeared to fold into the cloud and vanish almost instantly. Back at my basic concrete block hotel room off US 83, I reviewed the footage on my laptop. The GoPro clip was odd. It showed an unidentified object that seemed to have actual mass. When I zoomed in and enhanced the video, I could see the wind bending slightly around this thing. In all my years of tornado chasing, I'd never seen anything like it. I carefully isolated the clip and transferred it to an external drive, deciding not to post anything online just yet. Around 1 a.m., a soft, patient knock interrupted the quiet. 2 men in black suits stood outside my door, both pale-skinned, completely still. One was taller, wearing a plain fedora-like hat. They carried no luggage, no phones. I peered through the peephole, completely still myself. After about 20 seconds, the tall one spoke in a low, measured voice through the door. The file transfer had been strange from the start. When I tried to open the GoPro footage, an unfamiliar, unsupported format error appeared. I tried rebooting different software, nothing worked. The file size looked normal, the timestamp matched, but the video remained inaccessible. The main camera footage played perfectly fine, so I carefully examined the tornado clip, noting how uniquely the object interacted with the wind. These details felt significant. Something about that moment in the storm, that brief, impossible flash, seemed to demand careful investigation. So I unplugged everything and waited, holding on to the mysterious footage. They wanted the storm data, not my footage. "Are you prepared to surrender the storm data?" 2 men stood before me, and I didn't respond. My heart pounded in my ears as the shorter one shifted, almost speaking, but then they turned and walked away. I watched through the peephole until they vanished. I sat on the bed, trying to process what had just happened. 10 minutes later, I looked outside. The parking lot was empty save for a pickup 2 doors down. No black car, no footprints on the walkway. The next morning, I checked my laptop. The exported file was gone, not deleted, just missing. The folder was empty, and searches yielded nothing. The drive hadn't been wiped clean, just that one clip had disappeared. My external hard drive wouldn't mount. It spun up, clicked softly, then went silent. I had backups at home, but something didn't feel right. I skipped the next chase day and drove straight back to Lincoln. Weeks later, I tried retrieving the file from the memory card. It was there, but now just a mess of green frames and scrambled audio. Whatever had been clear before was now unreadable. I'm Nate Shepard, 38 years old, living in Missoula. I like getting out in the woods a few times a year to clear my head. Early October, before the heavy snow, I was hiking alone near the southern edge of the Bitterroot Range. The location wasn't on any marked trail, just an old, decommissioned Forest Service access road now used by hunters and occasional backwoods campers. I discovered this path the year before while helping a friend scout elk routes. That weekend was supposed to be a simple overnight solo. Hike in, set up camp, maybe catch some stars if the sky stayed clear. No cell service, no sounds except wind and birds. The kind of quiet that always settles the mind. I've still got the rest of the tornado footage. Most people see a tornado tearing through a field, destroying a fence, throwing a grain bin. But I remember something else, that half-second flash, that shape inside something it had no business being inside. And those 2 men at my door asking for it like I'd stolen something from them. I set out hiking around 2 p.m., parking by mile marker 87 and heading up the slope. The sky was overcast, but thin enough to see ridge lines against the clouds. About 1.5 miles into my trek, I came across a sign that caught my attention. Metal and dull grey, it was bolted crookedly. "You, into a pine tree, restricted zone. No entry beyond this point." It read in block letters with no agency logo or contact number. This struck me as strange. I'd traveled this path before and never noticed a boundary marker. The sign looked old, with rust eating into its edges, and the bottom right corner bent as if someone had tried to tear it off. I paused, considering my situation. I wasn't doing anything illegal, just hiking, no fire, no hunting. The sign seemed barely attached, with no fence or tape marking any boundary. It looked like a leftover from an old fire closure or logging claim, so I continued on. A couple more miles in, I set up camp near a small bluff overlooking a dry creek bed. The sun had dropped behind the mountains, and the temperature was falling quickly. I started a small fire, brewed some tea, and sat on a log with my headlamp off, watching the trees sway in the breeze. That's when I saw it. A light, about 30 or 40 feet up deep in the forest, maybe 100 yards away. Initially, I thought it might be a drone, with its precise hovering quality. But its movement was odd, pulsing, dimming to nothing, then flaring up a few feet away, almost like blinking in and out of existence. The color wasn't like a typical light. It was a soft, organic reddish glow that seemed to shift as if seen through water. Completely silent. No buzz, no clicking, nothing. Slowly, I stood up, careful not to draw attention, and extinguished the fire with a few scoops of dirt. The light pulsed twice more, then disappeared. I stared into the darkness, but it didn't return. Sleep was difficult that night. When morning came, I packed up early and started back down the trail. Everything seemed normal. No light, no sound, nothing out of place. But the forest felt different, hollow, as if the wind had stopped carrying sound, as if the forest itself had stopped listening. I was doing a routine flight between regional offices for a land survey company, hopping from Gallup, New Mexico to Chinle, Arizona late one afternoon in early June. My job was simple: deliver some documents for my boss. We had an old 1981 Piper Archer, and I was flying solo that day. About half a mile from where I'd parked on a hiking trail, just before the path starts to widen, I noticed two men standing near the tree line. They weren't typical hikers or park rangers. These guys wore clean, crisp black suits, no coats, no hats, no bags. Their shoes were impossibly pristine for this rugged terrain. The men stood side by side, not speaking, like they'd been waiting. One was shorter with grey hair and a sunken face. The other was taller and younger, but both shared the same unreadable expression. As I approached, I slowed down and gave a quick nod, thinking they might be from Fish and Game or some land management agency. But they didn't ask about my presence or introduce themselves. Instead, the shorter man looked directly at me and said very calmly, "This part of the forest doesn't exist." I laughed, thinking I'd misheard. He repeated it with the same steady tone. "This part of the forest doesn't exist." Unsure if I was being threatened or tested, I tried to defuse the situation. "Look," I said, "I didn't see any fence. I'm just hiking and heading back to my car." Neither man moved. The taller one finally spoke 3 chilling words. "You weren't here." I walked around them without making eye contact and quickened my pace. They didn't follow. When I reached the road, my truck was exactly where I'd left it, but the back tailgate was unlatched, which I never do. Nothing was missing, but things were shifted. My cooler was upside down, and my sleeping bag hung halfway out of the truck. I quickly packed everything, locked the doors, and drove straight back to Isola without stopping later that night. I checked the GPS app I'd used to track my hike. The track stopped abruptly halfway through, with no elevation data or timestamps. It was just a straight line ending in the middle of the woods. The next morning, I opened the file again. The entire track was gone. I haven't returned to that trail, or even come close, since that day. My old aircraft sits in a hangar at Gallup Municipal. It might be aging, but it still flies just fine. The day was typical for the region. Hot, slightly hazy, with light winds and minimal air traffic. The Four Corners area offers wide open airspace where you can travel for miles without encountering another plane. This particular flight was routine. Just me, a thermos of coffee, and a radio that kept breaking up with static. No passengers, no cargo except a sealed envelope tucked in the back. About 40 minutes into the journey, things got strange. Just after passing Shiprock, something caught my eye through the starboard window. Initially, I thought it might be a bird or a sun reflection. At roughly 200 feet higher and a quarter mile off, I realized this was no ordinary sight. It wasn't a plane, not like anything I'd ever seen before. A matte black triangle, perfectly solid, with no visible engines or markings, gliding silently alongside me. It moved with uncanny precision, holding position as if attached by an invisible string. I checked my transponder and squawk. Everything appeared normal. Attempts to radio out met with silence. For about 30 seconds, the object maintained its position. No cockpit, no windows were visible. Then it began drifting closer, not threateningly, but enough to make me sweat. Slowly turning 10 degrees south, I tried to remain calm. The object mirrored my movement exactly. No sound, no jet wash, just an eerily perfect, silent glide. Suddenly, it shot straight UP and vanished in 2 seconds. No contrail, no pressure change, nothing. I scanned the sky, but saw no trace of it. 20 seconds later, the radio crackled back to life with a standard weather update from Albuquerque Center. I responded, filed my position, and continued the route as if nothing unusual had occurred. Landing at Chinle's dirt strip, I was still unsettled. The dry, hot air carried the sharp scent of creosote. After handing the envelope to the waiting person in the small shed they call an office, I prepared to taxi back. That's when I saw him. A tall, lean figure in a black suit, white shirt, no tie, holding a clipboard. No vehicle in sight. I assumed he was waiting for someone else. But when I shut down the engine and opened the canopy, he walked directly toward me with purposeful intent. "Mister," he said. "That's my name," I replied. I stood there, my route suddenly called into question by a guy in narrow sunglasses who wasn't interested in basic social niceties. No handshake, no greeting, just a direct statement that stopped me cold. "Your route was misfiled," he said. "This airspace doesn't exist." The words hung between us, stark and unsettling. Something felt off about the whole encounter, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. "I apologize, but it seems like the original text is missing from your request. Could you please provide the text you'd like me to rewrite? Without the original text, I cannot complete the task."